You arrive just before the sky gives up its color. Not quite night, not quite day. That quiet hour when even the birds speak in whispers. When the world holds its breath and waits for something softer than sound. You are not here to seek answers. You are here because you have nowhere else to go, and that is holy. The path behind you has been loud, full of questions that answered nothing. People who promised peace but spoke like thunder. Walls that echoed your thoughts back at you louder than you meant them. You carry so much, but not forever. There is a stone gate ahead, not grand, not carved, just two pinewood doors, slightly open, as if they've been waiting, and someone inside knows. You are tired. Welcome to the monastery on the mountain. No one asks your name. No one cares what brought you here. The wind doesn't ask what you've done. The pine trees don't care what you believe. And the breath, yes, the breath only wants to come in and leave again. You are met by silence wearing the shape of an old monk. He nods, nothing more. And you understand. Words are too heavy for this place. So you bow. And he bows. And everything becomes still. In this courtyard of cracked stones and cedar, you feel your body for the first time in days. The weight in your chest loosens. The noise in your mind grows quiet, not gone, but quieter. And the monk turns, motioning with his sleeve, not to follow but to arrive. You walk, but the path no longer pushes. You move, but without direction. There is no schedule here, no destination, only breath. Only stillness, only the sound of your own footsteps forgetting where they were going. Have you ever truly arrived, not to a place but to yourself? The air tastes like smoke and pine. Your lungs remember something older than ambition. You are not achieving peace. You are laying down the tools that made you forget it. And somewhere behind your ribs, a quiet drum begins to beat, not the drum of action, but the slow, sacred rhythm of remembering. Tonight, you are not a project. You are not your past. You are not unfinished. You are simply here. A bench under a plum tree offers its arms. You sit, not because you're told, but because you finally stopped telling yourself not to. A single candle glows in a nearby window. The monk has left, but the silence remains. And in this silence, something begins to bloom, not in words, not in thoughts, but in the space where breath becomes prayer. The night deepens, but you are not afraid. This darkness is different. It is not empty. It is full of unseen trees, of resting birds, of stars that refuse to be loud. You lean back, you close your eyes. The bench beneath you becomes the earth. The wind becomes your mother. The sound of temple bells in the far distance, they do not call you to wake, they call you to soften. And you do. Piece by piece, the armor of thought melts. The tension behind your eyes sighs and disappears. Your jaw forgets the story it was holding. You are no longer the one climbing. You are the breath before the climb. And the breath before the climb asks for nothing. No progress, no improvement, just presence. Just a heartbeat, just the hush of being allowed to rest. The old monk once said, "The mountain does not speak when climbed, it only whispers to those who sit at its feet." So sit. Let the mountain be more ancient than your worry. Let the silence be deeper than your planning. Let your breath be slower than your thoughts. Because this is the sacred lesson no teacher gave you. You do not have to earn stillness. It is your birthright. The candle in the window flickers, and you feel its flame inside your own chest, not burning, but remembering. A warmth, a light, not trying to escape, just gently reminding you that it never left. So many years, you searched for wisdom in voices. But here, in this mountain courtyard, you find it in your exhale. There is no chant, no ceremony, no offering. Only this moment, only this bench, only this version of you that has finally stopped running. And if this were a story, It would not begin with, "Once upon a time." It would begin with, "You arrived," and that was enough. Let the air hold you. Let the dark cover you. Let the silence speak for you. It begins with a breath, as all healing does. You do not need to fix anything yet. Just sit. Just be. Just feel the weight of your body on the mat, the slow surrender of your shoulders, the quiet rhythm of breath returning home. Somewhere inside you, a storm still stirs. It doesn't shout anymore, but it hums a low memory of something that hurt. A word, a moment, a goodbye. It has passed, but you haven't. You still hold it, not like a memory, but like a blade. You carry it through the day, and worse, you take it to bed. The Buddha once said, "Pain is the first arrow. Suffering is the second." The first arrow you could not stop. Life struck. It hurt. That was real. But the second came from you. It wasn't sharp like the first, but it stayed longer. The first wound healed. The second one you reopened, again and again, with every thought. You said, "I shouldn't have said that. It was my fault. Why did I trust them? I'm such a fool." And with each whisper, you bled a little more. The second arrow isn't physical. It's the voice that keeps the wound alive, the guilt, the shame, the endless loops of what if and if only. Even now, your body might be safe, but your mind is still in the fire. Let's not rush past that. You deserve a soft place to unravel, so sit with me, here in this memory of a monastery. Let the candle burn. Let the air cool your face. Let the silence hold you without asking you to be anything but tired. You are not weak for being wounded, but you do not have to stay pierced by your own thoughts. Look to the altar stone, just beyond the incense smoke. Do you see it? A single arrow resting there. It is not broken, it is not buried. It is simply not in you. And that, my friend, is what freedom looks like. You thought if you replayed it enough, you could rewrite the ending. But memory is not a chalkboard. It is a river, and rivers don't flow backwards. Even now, your mind tries to solve a wound by stabbing it again. But pain does not become wisdom through repetition, only through release. The second arrow can look like discipline, like responsibility, like learning your lesson. But beneath all that, it is just punishment. And you have punished yourself enough. There is a quiet violence in holding on. You wanted to stay alert, so it wouldn't happen again. You wanted to keep the pain close, so you could protect yourself next time. But that's not protection. That's living in the wound. Can you remember a time when you sat in the sunlight, but couldn't feel it because of your thoughts? That is the second arrow. You are safe now. But the body doesn't always know. It follows the stories you tell it. So tonight, let's tell a new one. Not with words, but with silence. Not with fixing, but with softening. Imagine yourself beside the altar stone. The arrow still rests there, untouched, unthreatening. You reach out, not to grab it, but to witness it, to see how thin it is, how light, and how long it has lived in you, without needing to. You lay a palm over your chest, not for drama, not for ritual, just to feel your breath beneath it. You survived. That is enough. The hurt happened, but it is over. You are not what was done to you. You are the one who lived through it. And now, you are the one who can let go, not all at once, not with a dramatic gesture, but slowly as the night deepens, as the wind shifts, as the candle flickers low. Each breath, a loosening, each exhale, a step away from the second arrow. Can you feel it? That slight release, the space between thoughts, between stories, between wounds. That is where healing begins, not in the noise, but in the pause. There is no ceremony for letting go, no applause, no chant, no thunder. Just you, in the dark, deciding that pain no longer gets to live in your voice, your sleep, your tomorrow. The arrow still exists, but it does not belong inside you. You do not need to forgive yet. You do not need to forget. You only need to stop aiming the arrow at yourself. Is that too much to ask? Then ask less. Ask only for breath. And offer yourself that. Right now, here. Inhale and feel the body receive. Exhale and let it drop what never belonged. It's strange, isn't it? How we fear the emptiness left behind by pain. But listen, not all emptiness is hollow. Some is sacred, like the space after a storm, like the silence after a bell, like the breath after the second arrow has fallen from your chest. You are not meant to carry this forever. You are not meant to spiral through the same hurt. You are not meant to rehearse your regret until it becomes identity. The altar waits. The arrow rests. You are still here. Alive, aware, able to choose again. Not because you should, but because you can. So place it down, not because it makes you noble, not because it makes you holy, but because it makes you light. You were not born to be wounded. You were born to be free. The night has deepened, but so has your quiet. Even now, the old monk would not speak. He would only nod and point once more to the altar. There a single arrow, no longer in flight, no longer in flesh, just resting, just being, just done. Let yourself feel that. The wound was real, but the suffering that's yours to release. You wake with a weight in your chest, not from the world, but from the war you've been waging inside. It's quiet now, but you can still feel it, the silent fight against thoughts you don't want to have, feelings you don't want to feel, memories you keep trying to silence. They rise anyway, like smoke from a fire you didn't start. You tell them to go, but they stay. Fear, sorrow, regret. They don't knock. They slip through cracks. They know where the soft places are. Tonight, you are not here to win. You are here to bow to the shadow you thought you had to destroy. Let me tell you a story. Once, long ago, a monk returned to his cave high in the cold mountain cliffs and found something waiting inside. A demon. Not a dream, not a trick of the candlelight. A real one with long teeth, dark skin, and a grin that smelled like decay. The monk froze. Then he ran. He recited mantras. He prayed. He threw herbs and bells. He lit incense and screamed into the air. But the demon remained, laughing, grinning, growing. The more the monk resisted, the larger it became, until it filled the entire cave, scraping its claws along the stone walls, its breath stealing all the warmth from the fire. And the monk collapsed outside, trembling, powerless. That's when the silence spoke. You've tried to kill it. Now try feeding it. What does it mean to feed a demon? It does not mean surrendering to it. It means acknowledging that it is already here, and still you can be kind. The monk stood again, his robes damp with fear, his breath uneven. He stepped back into the cave. The demon was waiting, but it didn't lunge. It stared, curious. This time, the monk did not chant, did not fight, did not flee. Instead, he lit a small fire, boiled a bowl of tea, and placed it on the floor for the demon. A gesture, not of defeat but of understanding. And something shifted. The demon looked down at the tea, then up at the monk, and in that moment, something ancient passed between them, an agreement. The monk was no longer food. He was no longer prey. He was a host. And the demon, startled by its own welcome, grew smaller. Not gone, but humbled, honored. They sat in silence. Two beings, one light, one shadow, one body, two truths. Neither destroyed the other. And that was peace. So tonight, if fear visits you again, do not push it away. Pour it tea. Let it know that you see it, that you understand it is only here because something in you is still hurting, not evil, just hungry. And hunger, when fed with kindness, does not grow. It quiets. It learns. It is safe. Have you been fighting a demon of your own? Not one with claws, but one that whispers. You're not enough. You'll always feel this way. Something is wrong with you. These are not truths. They are cries. They are echoes from a wound you were never taught how to tend. And the more you push them down, the more they return. Stronger, lonelier. But if you welcome them, offer them presence, something changes. The fear in your belly, the sorrow in your chest, the shame in your spine. They soften. They do not vanish, but they stop screaming. Because you stopped ignoring. You became the monk with the tea bowl. You stopped asking what was wrong with you and started asking what was needed. Rest, warmth, silence, permission to feel something without being devoured by it. Tonight, you are not collapsing. You are not failing. You are not weak for sitting with your fear. You are finally learning to feed it instead of fearing it. And slowly, so slowly, you might not even notice the demon becomes a guest. No longer looming, just lingering. No longer roaring, just resting. And one day, not tonight, but someday, you might look into its eyes and see your own reflection. Not because you became it, but because you finally saw what it was protecting. A child, a wound, a part of you that didn't know how else to survive. And now, you are here. You are safe. You are the one holding the tea. You have made peace with the shadow. The bowl rests on the floor beside you, steam rising into the dark. No voice, no answer, just breath, and the sacred quiet of not needing to run. The fire flickers low. The demon sleeps, and so may you. There is a rhythm the world has forgotten, not the rhythm of clocks or progress or calendars filled with urgency, but the older rhythm, the one beneath breath, the one beneath wind, the one the river remembers. And tonight, you're invited to return to it, not by effort, but by stillness. There is a path that winds through cedar trees, worn smooth by the sandals of monks who never rushed. It leads to a moss-covered bridge, wooden and low, arching gently over a stream that hums like an old lullaby. You've walked here before, not with your feet, but in your longing, that quiet ache for rest, for gentleness, for the kind of time that doesn't chase you. You've hurried through so much, not just the days, but the moments meant to soften you, grabbing, reaching, trying to get somewhere faster than your soul could follow. But the river has no such plan, and it arrives everywhere. The monk who tends this path, he once carried the same fire in his chest, the same unrest. He was young then, devoted, disciplined, but always rushing. He rose before the sun. He chanted louder. He walked faster. He believed enlightenment lived just beyond the next breath, if only he could hurry hard enough to catch it. But all he caught was exhaustion. And one morning, after tripping on his own sandals, he sat beside this very stream and did not rise. The river gurgled beside him. The moss dripped slowly from the stones. And he saw, perhaps for the first time, the river does not rush, yet it reaches everything. He did not speak that morning, not to the trees, not to his teacher, not even to the ache inside his legs. He simply watched. A single leaf floated past, trembling but not resisting. It danced where the water danced. It turned when the current turned. And it made its way not by control, but by surrender. The monk wept, not for sadness, but for the years he'd confused striving with purpose. He had mistaken speed for wisdom and pressure for devotion. But the stream knew better. And now, so did he. That day, he stopped chanting faster. He stopped bowing harder. He began to walk the way the water flowed, with attention, but without force. He walked more slowly, but more arrived. He spoke less, but more was heard. He stopped grasping for progress and began noticing how close peace already was. And over time, his very presence changed. Visitors would come to the monastery, stressed, anxious, buzzing with the electricity of not enough, and he would meet them with pauses, with breath, with that same unhurried gaze the river once gave him. Not advice, not answers, only stillness. And somehow they left lighter, the same way the stream leaves the stone, not by breaking it, but by touching it again and again, until it forgets how to be sharp. So ask yourself gently tonight, have you mistaken speed for direction? Has the pressure to arrive stolen the peace of being here? What if your slowness was not failure, but proof that you're learning to walk with the river? Some lessons do not arrive in words. They arrive in pace, in pause, in the way your breath finally drops into your belly without you forcing it to. There is a bridge ahead, the same one the monk once crossed without noticing it. But now he stops there often, not to go anywhere but to witness. Beneath it, the stream carries leaves, petals, cloud reflections, and forgotten light. It rushes nowhere, yet nothing is left behind. He places his tea bowl on the wooden railing, lets the steam rise into the wind, and smiles, not because everything is perfect, but because he no longer believes he must fix it all before he can rest. That smile, it lives in you, too. Even if buried beneath layers of urgency, expectation, and the idea that healing must be fast to be real, you are allowed to take the slow path. You are allowed to arrive late and still be right on time. You are allowed to breathe as the river breathes deeply, softly, without agenda. There is no rush to become who you are. Water never hurries, and still it carves mountains. So let the moss grow, let the leaves drift, let the moment be enough. You don't have to keep up, you only have to let go. Not of your dreams, but of the punishment you attach to them. Not of your path, but of the pace that steals your peace. The stream is still singing, the bridge still holds, the monk still walks slowly through the trees. And you are beginning to remember what it means to arrive without racing. Tonight, you do not need to finish anything. You only need to feel yourself no longer running, no destination, no delay, only the sound of water touching stone, and the quiet return of your breath to your body. This peace is not earned, it is remembered, and it has been waiting for you beneath the bridge all along. Let it hold you now, let it teach you how to wait, let it show you the truth in stillness. You are not behind, you are not late, you are flowing exactly as you should. It rained on the morning your sorrow returned. Not loud, not storming, just enough for the roof to whisper, just enough for memory to rise from the cracks. You didn't mean to remember, but shame doesn't need permission. You carry it quietly, like a bowl you hope no one will inspect too closely. And tonight, as the world winds down, you feel the edges again, of failure, of being too much or not enough, of that small voice that says, "You broke the one thing that mattered." Let me offer you another voice, a story. There was once a young novice, barely 14, who had arrived at the temple barefoot, with nothing but silence in his pockets. The monks welcomed him. They shaved his head, they handed him robes, the color of ash and tea, and they gave him one thing to carry, his alms bowl. It was small, worn, but sacred. He held it with both hands as if it were the shape of his future. Each morning before the sun, he'd step out barefoot and walk the narrow stone path down into the village, his bowl cradled to his chest. He was quiet, humble. He bowed to every face, no matter how many times they ignored him. Some days, his bowl filled with rice and fruit. Other days, just wind. But still he bowed. Still he returned. The bowl was everything. And then one morning, in the dim light of rain, his sandals slipped. Stone met pottery, and the bowl broke. Not into pieces, but into a long, deep crack that cut across its middle like a scar no one could ignore. He stood there in the drizzle, holding what he feared made him unworthy to return. He did not cry right away. Shame moves differently. It doesn't need tears, only silence. He picked up the cracked bowl, still warm from his hands, and he ran, back through the trees, past the shrine, back into the temple courtyard, where monks were already gathered, chanting the hour awake. But he did not join them. He hid behind the well, shivering, his hands over the crack as if it could be hidden by wishing alone. And in that moment, he thought he had ruined everything, not the bowl but his place, his promise, his path. The elder monk found him at dusk. He did not speak. He only sat beside him, watching the sky drip its sadness into the soil. Eventually, the boy opened his hands. The monk looked at the bowl, then at the boy. Then, with no anger, only softness, he said, "Now it can hold what it could not before." The boy didn't understand. Not fully, but the elder took the bowl, placed it on a stone beneath the open sky, and walked away. That night, rain came in sheets. The roof hummed. The world wept. And by morning, the cracked bowl was full, not of food, but of sky, of silence, of surrender. And it did not leak. It held the rain exactly as it was flawed, quiet, complete. Sometimes, you don't see the gift until something breaks. Sometimes, the teaching waits until the bowl is no longer whole. You may have been told that broken things are less, that cracks mean failure, that imperfection should be hidden. But in the monastery, they teach something else, that when a bowl cracks, it learns how to sing. The sound of water in a perfect bowl is dull, contained. But in a cracked one, it echoes differently. It resonates, it hums, because now the bowl knows what it means to be empty, to be full, to lose, to receive. You are like that bowl. You have cracked, not just once, but over time, through grief, through shame, through moments that told you you weren't enough. But you are still here, you still hold, you still carry. The rain falls, and you catch it. Not perfectly, not completely, but beautifully. What if the crack is not a wound, but an opening? What if shame is not the end of the path, but the softening that lets the teaching begin? You do not need to hide the fracture. You do not need to run from the break. There is space inside you for tenderness. There is a stillness waiting on the other side of failure. It doesn't ask you to succeed. It only asks you to stay, to let the rain in, to let the bowl hold, to understand that nothing was ever lost, only changed. And even now, beneath this night, you are not ruined. You are not broken. You are becoming a vessel for something deeper than perfection. The novice kept his bowl. He used it every morning. And with time, the crack grew smooth. The lines of it became sacred, and when visitors came, he would smile softly when they stared, and he'd say, "It holds more now than it ever did before." So if tonight you are grieving a mistake, a flaw, a moment you cannot undo, place it in the bowl. Let it be caught by the same silence that once caught the rain. No fixing, no rushing, only reverence, only the quiet strength of staying with what is. And perhaps tomorrow, when you look inside yourself, you'll find that even your sorrow has become something you can hold, not as failure, but as form, not as shame, but as story. A bowl, a crack, a little rain, and a place for healing to begin. Somewhere between yesterday and tomorrow, you forgot how to be here. It wasn't your fault. The world moves fast. Your thoughts move faster. And somewhere in that blur of expectation and longing, you began to walk, not for the sake of walking, but to arrive. Always somewhere else. Always some moment later than now. But tonight, there is no path. Just steps. Just the hush of your breath against the quiet. Just the gentle weight of your body on the mat. Finally not going anywhere. There is an old koan passed from monk to monk, like a cup of morning tea that asks, without walking, how will you arrive? But if you walk to arrive, where have you already gone? There is no answer. Only the feeling of sandals being left behind at the foot of the bell tower and the slow press of bare feet against temple stone. The monk in the story, he did not know he was part of a teaching. He only knew he was tired. Every step he took felt like a test. Was this the right way? Was he getting closer? Was the bell above him ringing for someone else? He wanted certainty. He wanted arrival. But the abbot only said, walk, not toward, not for, just walk. So he did. One step, then another. And slowly, the question softened. He stopped chasing silence and started hearing it, not at the summit, but between his steps. He walked the temple grounds every dawn, not to get anywhere but to remember what it felt like to not be running. At first, it was difficult. The mind wanted to leap forward, to measure, to narrate, to plan. Where am I going? It asked. What's the point? It demanded, but the stones beneath his feet never answered. They only offered themselves to each step, one, then another, then another. Until the monk's mind grew quiet, not because he silenced it, but because he stopped feeding it with destinations. The bell rang above the tower, not as a call, but as a reminder. You are here. You have always been here. Even when your mind wandered miles ahead, your feet were always in this moment. He noticed how the trees didn't try to bloom all at once, how the birds didn't rush to finish their song. And slowly, so slowly, he began to walk as they did, not to reach, but to be. One day, he passed a visiting monk, pacing in the courtyard, counting his breaths, measuring his chants, watching the sun like it was a deadline. And the young monk asked, "Where does the path lead?" The older monk smiled and replied, "The step you're standing in." There was no mystery, no map, just a pointing, not forward, but downward, into the souls, into the ground, into now. Your mind may try to race ahead tonight. It may whisper plans, worries, regrets. It may urge you to get somewhere, some answer, some peace, some sleep. But you don't have to go anywhere to rest. You don't need a completed path, only the willingness to feel this moment fully. Inhale, step, exhale, step. That's all this life ever is. Not a destination, not a finish line, not a grand arc of meaning you must race to catch. Just sandals left behind, just bare feet touching what is. Let the bell ring above you. Let the sound rise and fall without needing to chase it. Let your mind return not because it's forced, but because it's tired of fleeing. There is nowhere to arrive but here. There is no future you must conquer tonight. There is only this breath, this step, this soft hush between all the noise. And when your thoughts come, as they will, bow to them gently and walk on, not forward, not back, but here, only here. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are not late to your own life. You are simply learning how to stay without striving. And in that staying, you become the bell. You become the ground. You become the pathless peace you thought you had to seek. So rest now, as if you've already arrived. Because you have. The storm came without warning. Not outside, but within. You felt it earlier today, that sudden gust behind your ribs, that cold swirl beneath the thoughts. No thunder, no lightning, just the rising wind of emotion you couldn't name. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes grief, sometimes just the quiet pressure of being alive in a body that carries too much. You did not summon it, and yet it arrived. But tonight, you do not have to stop the storm. You do not have to fix the sky. You only have to keep the flame, that small, sacred center of you that does not panic when the world shakes. It is not loud. It is not fierce. It does not command or demand. It simply stays. There is a story the monks pass down on nights like this, when the wind scrapes against the windows and the soul wants to flee. A story of a candle placed in the hallway of an old temple just before a monsoon. The elder monk lit it without speaking. He placed it beneath the carved bell, near the back corridor where the wind tunneled strongest. And when the novice asked, "Why light a candle where it will surely be blown out?" the master smiled and replied, "Not to stop the storm, but to watch what survives it." The storm arrived that night like sorrow with wings. It shook the roof tiles. It howled through the cedar beams. It flung leaves against the windows like angry prayers. And the candle, it trembled, bent, leaned, but it did not die. All night, the monks passed by that corridor, each time expecting to find darkness, each time finding the flame. Flickering, yes, but living, because it was not trying to fight the wind. It was simply being what it was, a flame in its nature, unshaken in its knowing. There is power in that, not the kind that crushes chaos, but the kind that survives it, the kind that says, "I am still here. I do not need control to be whole. I do not need the sky to calm before I breathe again." You have that power. You've felt it, even if only in glimpses. The moment you chose stillness when panic begged for movement, the time you breathed slowly, even when everything around you raced. The way you softened your shoulders when the world tried to harden your heart. That was your flame. You do not need to become a mountain tonight. You only need to become the candle. Small, steady, unwilling to forget its light, no matter how much darkness comes. When dawn came, the storm left like it had never arrived. The sky softened, the wind rested, and the monks emerged from their cells and corners, blinking like children into the wet light of morning. But no one rushed to the garden. No one spoke of broken branches. They gathered in the corridor, where the candle burnt low, tilted with wax, quiet as ever still glowed. The master bowed. So did the rest, not to the candle's strength, but to its refusal to disappear. Let that be your image tonight. Not perfection, not control, not the absence of fear, but the presence of a light that knows who it is, even when everything shakes. Your heart may flutter, your breath may tighten, your mind may swirl, but the flame inside you does not flinch. It bends, but it does not leave. So stay with it. Feel its warmth behind your ribs, the place that says, "I am not the storm. I am the one who watches it." And maybe tonight, you don't have to solve anything, or finish anything, or escape anything. You just have to remain lit, no matter how loud it gets, no matter how long it rains. Let the wind pass, let the thoughts pass. You are the candle. You are the glow in the corridor. You are the silent yes beneath the noise. You are not losing yourself. You are watching yourself survive. And slowly, quietly, without asking permission, morning will come. You've spoken too much lately, not with your mouth, but with your being. The way you've tried to be understood, the way you've bent, adjusted, performed, trying to be heard, trying to be seen, trying to mean something to someone. And now your spirit is tired. Not just tired like sleep, but tired like erosion, the slow wearing down of a self that's tried too long to be enough in a world that never seems to notice. So tonight, You are not asked to speak. You are not asked to shine. You are not asked to be remarkable, or profound, or strong. You are only asked to sit in the snowfall beside the old bronze bell and listen to nothing, because that's where it begins. The quiet, the cold, the stillness that does not demand you rise or perform. There is a bell in the far end of the temple garden, too large to hang from wood. It rests in the open, its bronze sides softened by decades of weather. Moss gathers along the rim. Snow gathers in the creases. And yet, it does not complain. It does not cry out to be rung. It does not worry that no one hears it. It simply waits. And when the monks gather on certain sacred days, they strike it once. Once is enough. And the sound rolls over the forest like a slow silver river. It does not rise fast. It does not fade quickly. It echoes because it is full not of noise, but of stillness. You are like that bell. You just forgot. There is a silence inside you, deeper than exhaustion. It's not the silence of giving up. It's the silence of returning to what was never missing. So much of your life has been spent trying to explain yourself, trying to make people hear what hurts, what matters, what needs care. But there comes a moment when words no longer help, not because you failed, but because your worth is not earned by being understood. It is held, like the weight of the bell, unmoved, even when nothing strikes it. The novice monks once asked the teacher, "Shouldn't the bell be rung every morning?" The teacher replied, "Does the mountain sing if no one climbs it? Must the sun rise with an audience?" The bell does not beg, and still its presence shapes the garden. Even covered in snow, even silent for weeks, it holds gravity. The deer bow near it, the crows land upon it, children pass and fall quiet. Why? Because something in them remembers a presence, doesn't need to perform to be sacred. Neither do you. You have performed for so long, in conversations, in relationships, in moments where you smiled so someone else could be comfortable while your heart ached in secret. And maybe you've wrung yourself too often, struck your spirit again and again, trying to be helpful, beautiful, worthy. But the truth is, you've never needed to ring. You are allowed to rest in your own silence, to not respond, to not be cheerful, to not be useful, to be a bell beneath fresh snow, still heavy, still whole, still holy. Tonight, no one will strike the bell, not because it's forgotten, but because silence is sacred too. The monks let it sleep in the snowfall, and in doing so, they remember a deeper lesson. That presence does not always come with sound. That meaning does not require performance. That being is enough. So, rest now, not because you've earned it, but because nothing more is needed. You do not have to post. You do not have to reply. You do not have to justify your quiet. There is no audience that needs convincing. There is only you, and the hush inside your chest, and the weight of your own worth pressed gently against the snow. You are not behind. You are not invisible. You are not fading. You are simply still. And stillness does not mean emptiness. It means you've stopped leaking yourself into places that never listened. So let the snow fall. Let no one call your name. Let the bell sleep. Let yourself sleep. And if tomorrow comes and someone asks, "Why have you been so quiet?" you may simply smile and say, "Because I no longer ring to be remembered." Your silence is not your absence. It is your return. Your stillness is not your failure. It is your sanctuary. You are not missing. You are simply resting beneath the soft white hush of your own sacredness. And from this place, nothing needs to be proven. Nothing needs to be performed. The bell is not broken. The bell is not forgotten. It is waiting for the sound that will find it when it's ready. But for now, let the snow remain, and let yourself be quietly enough. It's strange, isn't it, how often we run towards something while stepping over everything that already waited? How many moments have you passed by, distracted, planning, believing the peace you needed lived somewhere else? Tonight, you are not asked to chase. You are not asked to improve, only to notice what is still warm beside you. Even now, even here, there was once a young monk who burned with longing, not for fame, not for wealth, but for wisdom, enlightenment, truth. He had studied for years. He had memorized the sutras, risen before dawn, walked the meditation path until his sandals tore. He had sat through winters of silence, through summers of aching limbs, and still he felt something was missing. His teacher, an old monk with a laugh like wind through reeds, would always meet his questions with the same reply: "Drink your tea." It infuriated him. He wanted teachings, answers, the path. But the old monk would only pour him tea and gesture gently to the steam. So the younger monk grew more determined. He sought out other temples. He read more. He traveled across provinces in search of the one master who could give him what he was certain he lacked. He left early. He packed quickly. And when the old monk poured tea for him one last time, he nodded politely but did not drink. The cup sat on the low table, steam rising as he bowed and walked away. He became known for his discipline, his posture, his sharp mind. He could recite entire teachings by heart. He could sit through storms without blinking, but still something hollow echoed inside him. He had gone so far, learned so much, but never felt what he thought wisdom would give him. Peace, presence, the quiet warmth of enough. One evening, older now, his beard streaked with grey, he passed through the old mountains where his first teacher had once lived. The temple was still there, the wind still curled between its beams. The garden still held silence like an old friend. And there, seated in the exact same place, was the old monk, eyes softer, wrinkles deeper, but unchanged. The younger monk bowed low. The old monk smiled, and without a word, he poured him tea. Steam rose. Silence grew. The younger monk, not so young anymore, finally lifted the cup. He drank, and for the first time, he noticed the heat, the earthiness, the taste. He looked up, eyes wet. "It was always this good," he whispered. The old monk nodded, still smiling. "But you were never here. Tonight, there may be something in your life like that cup. Something still warm, still waiting, still full, but overlooked. Not because you don't care, but because you've been so busy seeking what never truly left. That relationship, that breath, that quiet room you pass through on your way to someplace else. We all leave our cups behind. But the beautiful truth is many of them still wait, still steam, still offer what they always did. Your peace may not live in tomorrow. It may live in the now you've forgotten to taste. There is no shame in having chased. It's part of the story. It sharpens your return. But at some point, you must sit again and drink. Not sip and scroll. Not sip and think. Just drink. Let it be enough that this tea is hot. This floor is beneath you. This moment is alive. The monk never found wisdom in the distant mountains. He found it in the warmth that never left, only cooled while he ran. So place your hand on the small cup of this moment. Smell the steam, taste the breath, feel the weight of being fully here. The search will wait. The story will wait. But this tea, this now, will not. So drink, before it grows cold, before the wind carries the steam into memory. You are not late, but you are right on time to return to what has always loved you silently. The tea was always hot. You only needed to stay long enough to feel it. The world moves fast. Mountains are reshaped. Rivers vanish. Nations blink into being, then disappear like shadows at dusk. But somewhere, deep in a quiet valley where no road ever reached, A single stone never moved. It did not chase anything. It did not explain itself. It did not become anything other than what it was. And yet everything passed through it. Rain, war, silence, time. Tonight, you carry a kind of weight, but it's not the weight of failure. It's the pressure to become, to do, to prove, to justify your stillness with purpose. Let that go now. Sit, not to begin something, but to end the chase. The monks used to tell a story not in words, but by walking you to a place in the forest where nothing grew around the center. And in the middle, a flat grey rock sat beneath the same tree for 10,000 years. It wasn't a shrine. No incense, no offerings, no teachings carved into its surface. Just stillness. Just presence. They'd let you sit beside it. Not to speak, not to ask. Just to feel what doesn't move even as everything else does. You wouldn't understand at first. The silence was too large, the rock too simple. But eventually, as your thoughts began to fade, you'd notice you weren't waiting for anything anymore, because the stone wasn't waiting either. And yet, there it was, undisturbed, unchanged, entirely enough. There was a time when kings marched through that valley, clad in gold, followed by drums and flags and soldiers. The earth trembled beneath them. The sky turned grey with dust. And still, the rock did not move. It did not react. It did not hide. It simply witnessed. Years later, the kingdom crumbled. The banners faded, the names forgotten. But the rock remained. Then came temples, monks, rituals. Some bowed before the stone, some ignored it entirely. One generation said it was sacred, another said it was ordinary. The rock cared for neither. It remained what it had always been, not timeless because it was powerful, but because it never rushed to mean something. You may be feeling restless tonight. The kind of restlessness that comes from believing you are behind. Behind in life, behind in becoming, behind in healing. But behind what? According to whom? There is no race. There is no bell. There is only this breath. And the space it enters as you allow yourself to simply exist without improvement. The rock never changed shape to please the eyes of the passing world. It never asked, "Am I enough? Am I doing enough? Do they see me?" It just was. And that was its greatest teaching. So sit now, not as someone who is failing, but as someone who has arrived at the moment where rushing is no longer needed. Let the empires fall. Let the noise pass. Let your own heart settle back into stone. When the monks finally stopped visiting, the path to the valley disappeared. Trees reclaimed the way. Moss grew across the steps, but the rock remained, still whole, still present, still unconcerned with being known. And in that forgotten space, where no one bowed anymore, the wind began to pray for itself. It circled the stone slowly, then left. The birds rested on its surface without naming it sacred, and still it taught, not in words, but in its refusal to need anything else to be full. So tonight, as your thoughts quiet and the weight of performance slides off your shoulders, you may begin to feel that presence too. Not the voice that says, "You should," "You must," "You're not there yet," but the deeper voice, the older one, the one beneath it all that says only, "Stay still. Enough. You don't have to rise right now. You don't have to decide. You don't have to prepare, explain, or build. There will be time for motion. There will be time for change. But not this moment. This moment belongs to the rock, to the part of you that already knows how to be unmoved when everything else shifts. Let that part breathe now. Let it soften your eyes, your jaw, your pace. You are not going nowhere. You are going deeper into the one place the world can't touch, your stillness. And in that stillness, you are already whole, already worthy, already here. You are the stone that waited 10,000 years, not for someone to see it, but for the right moment to remember it never had to move to matter. You've been holding on to what, perhaps even you aren't sure anymore, a name, a hope, a version of yourself that once made sense, but the season is changing. And something in you feels it not as a choice, but as a quiet ache, a loosening in the hands that once clutched so tightly. Still, it's hard to let go, even when it's time, even when holding on begins to feel like pain. So tonight, let's sit beneath the turning trees. Let the air be cool against your face. Let the silence speak softly, not to command, but to comfort. And let me tell you of the first leaf who fell. High in the mountains, in the arms of a tall maple, a young leaf had just begun to turn. Gold, not yet dry. Light, but not yet ready. The wind had started whispering, not with force, but invitation. The other leaves rustled with nervous laughter. "It's too soon," one said. "Hold tighter," said another. "We don't know what's below." But the golden one was quiet. Something inside her had already begun the goodbye. She didn't understand it, didn't ask for it. But the stem that once clung with such purpose now felt less like a lifeline and more like a boundary. She watched the sun drift lower, the shadows stretching across the forest floor like long arms of sleep. She wondered what it would feel like to fall. Would it hurt? Would she shatter? Would she lose herself in the wind and never be found again? She trembled. But she listened to something older than her fear. That night, she dreamed of roots. Not her own, for leaves don't grow down, but the ones below that held the tree she clung to. She saw them sleeping under the soil, wrapped around stone, drinking rain slowly like monks in meditation. The roots did not fear the leaf's fall. They had seen it before, countless times, and they whispered in her dream, in a language not of words, but of warmth. Falling is not the end. It is how you join the earth again. When she woke, a soft ache filled her spine. Not pain, but the beginning of release. She turned slightly in the breeze, feeling her edges flutter. She thought of all she had seen from this branch. The sky turning fire orange, the rains that painted the bark darker, the birds that had once rested nearby. And she realized she had already lived a full season. Why then was she afraid to let it end? Around her the other leaves still clung, still shook when the wind rose, still told each other stories of staying, but she was quiet now. Not because she had no fear, but because something deeper was starting to grow beneath it, a kind of knowing, a kind of trust that did not ask for explanations. The wind returned, gentler this time. She didn't fight it, and for the first time she didn't just sway, she leaned, not far, just enough to feel how the world might catch her if she let go, just enough to wonder if perhaps falling wasn't leaving but arriving. The sky grew quiet, and in that stillness, the branch beneath her no longer felt like safety, only delay. She looked once more at the other leaves. She loved them, not because they were strong, but because they were afraid together. Still, she knew some things must be done alone. A final breath moved through her veins, and in that sacred moment, she stopped resisting. She let go. There was no sound, no thunder, no tearing, just a soft exhale and a single leaf beginning to fall. Downward, not fast but free. She did not spiral in panic. She did not grasp at the air. She simply trusted that the wind knew where to take her. She passed through the space she had only watched from above. She saw the roots not in dream, but in truth. She did not shatter. She did not vanish. She landed gently on a patch of moss bathed in golden light, and for the first time, she felt rest. Not because she was nothing, but because she no longer had to be something. Above her, the trees stood silent, not mourning but bowing, For even the tree knew that to fall was not to fail, to let go was not to lose, it was to return. And the wind whispered once more, this time not to invite her, but to thank her, for being the first to trust, for showing the others that surrender is also sacred. The next morning, another leaf let go, then another, and another. None of them rushed, none of them were forced. But one by one, they followed the path of the first. Not to escape, not to disappear, but to find the ground that had waited so patiently to hold them. So if you, too, have been clinging to a name, a love, a hope that no longer fits, let the golden leaf guide you. Let it show you that falling apart is sometimes how we fall into peace. Let yourself be caught by the soft ground of who you've always been. You do not have to hold on forever. You do not have to explain why it's time. You only have to listen to the quiet truth beneath your ribs that says, it's okay now, it's time. And when you're ready, not before, you will let go. Not because you are weak, but because you are finally strong enough to release. You are the leaf that let go first. And because of you, others will follow. Not to disappear, but to be free. The mind seeks meaning like the body seeks warmth. It clutches at words, arranges them like stones in a river, hoping they will carry it across. But there comes a moment quiet, uninvited, when even the most sacred words begin to dissolve, not because they failed, but because they were only ever pointing. Tonight, you are not here to learn, not here to memorize, not here to gather wisdom like coins in your pocket. You are here to lay it all down, every line, every phrase, every thought that tries to earn its keep by explaining something. Let them go. Let them scatter like petals on the floor of the temple. There is a story the monks tell in hushed tones at the end of long retreats when the mind is too tired to argue. It is the story of the monk who read too much. He was devoted, precise. He copied every sutra by hand. His calligraphy was flawless, his memory vast. He could quote the words of the Buddha in the darkest hour with the accuracy of a bell. But his eyes were weary, his shoulders always tight, and though he spoke of stillness, he never truly stopped moving. One morning, he found the old master kneeling in the archive hall, the room where every scroll was kept. Dozens of sutras unrolled on the floor, thousands of words gently sleeping in the dust and light. The master sat in silence among them, his hands empty. The younger monk knelt beside him and whispered, "Which one are you reading?" The master closed his eyes, the one between them. At first, the younger monk didn't understand. He glanced at the scrolls, the Heart Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, the words that had shaped his very breath for years. He wanted to ask again, but something in the master's quiet held him. So he stayed still and listened, not to the scrolls, but to the space between them, the crackle of morning wind slipping through the paper windows, the shifting creak of the floorboards, the small thud of his own heartbeat in his chest. It was not loud, but it was real, and it asked for nothing. They sat together for hours, the master unmoving, the monk slowly softening. His mind reached for meaning, for something to decode, to summarize, to remember. But there was no lesson, no chant, no revelation. Only the silence of being beside what did not speak, but somehow still said everything. The master eventually rose, bowed to the space as one might bow to a teacher, and left. The scrolls remained unread, but something had shifted, not in the words, but in the monk who had finally heard what was never written. That evening, the monk did not open a scroll. He sat alone in the archive hall. The lamps were low, casting long shadows across the wooden floor where dust moved like mist. He did not recite. He did not chant. He simply breathed and listened, to the silence between the teachings, to the pauses between the breaths, to the gap between knowing and being, and slowly he began to realize the words had always been a doorway, not the truth, but the opening through which truth passed. Like light through a paper screen, like wind beneath the robe, like water between the fingers, not to be held, only to be received. He wept, not from sorrow, but from the strange tenderness of no longer needing to understand. There was nothing more to learn tonight, and nothing more to prove. The scrolls remained unread, unrushed, still sacred, still whole. But now, so was the space around them. So was the monk who finally knew he did not need to speak to be spoken to. Tonight, you are invited into that same stillness. You do not need to recite your suffering. You do not need to explain your longing. You do not need to decode your mind. You only need to listen for the silence that holds you beneath it all. The teachings are still here, but you have entered the space they were pointing to. The scrolls are unrolled on the floor. The wind moves without meaning. The room does not ask. The night does not instruct. It only holds. And in that holding, everything is said without sound. You are already inside the sutra that has no words. You are already inside the silence that needs no form. Stay here, where nothing explains itself and nothing has to. Let this stillness be your last teacher. Let it teach you what the words never could. You are not missing anything. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply becoming quiet enough to hear what has always been waiting to be heard. And in that silence, you are whole. There are many stories about enlightenment, blinding flashes of insight, mountaintop revelations, decades of silence ending with a single syllable. But sometimes, awakening arrives with a yawn. Sometimes, the gate to wisdom is a nap. And tonight, you are allowed to laugh at the journey. Not to mock it, but to soften the pressure of always having to grow. There is a story rarely told in formal circles, not because it isn't true, but because it feels too ordinary. It begins with a novice named Haru, who was known for two things: his devotion and his drowsiness. No one doubted his sincerity. He woke early, swept the temple floors with love, gathered firewood with reverence, and bowed deeper than anyone in morning meditation. But by mid-afternoon, his head would start to nod. During sutra readings, during tea preparation, once even during walking meditation, where he stumbled into a pillar and apologized to it. The older monks teased him gently. They called him the dozing bodhisattva, but Haru never took offense. He always smiled and promised he was trying his best to stay awake. Then came the final retreat. The master, old now, his voice grown thin like smoke, announced that after 30 years of teaching, he would give one last Dharma talk. It will contain everything, he said. The whole path in one sitting. The temple buzzed with anticipation. Monks from distant valleys arrived. Scrolls were readied. Cushions were cleaned. Haru too prepared. He washed his robes, folded his blanket, and placed his zafu right at the front. This time, he whispered to himself, I will stay awake. The temple filled before dawn. Candles flickered in the hallway like tiny moons. The rain tapped gently on the wooden beams, as if even the weather had come to listen. Haru sat tall, eyes wide, breath steady. The master entered in silence. He did not carry scrolls. He did not wear special robes. Just his usual smile, that unreadable, weathered smile that made you question everything and also feel entirely at home. He bowed. The monks bowed, and then he spoke, slowly, clearly, with a voice that barely rose above the rustling of sleeves. The truth is not far. It is not later. It is not earned by exhaustion. Haru nodded, committed to catching every word. Awakening is not a prize. It is a presence. You do not build it. You rest into it. Haru blinked. The master's voice, so calm, so gentle, like wind in long grass. His head tilted slightly, just for a moment. There is no need to chase. The moment you stop chasing, Haru's chin touched his chest. "You arrive." A soft snore rose from the front row. Haru, seated like a statue, had drifted into a dream so seamlessly that even the monks beside him didn't notice at first. The master did. Of course. He paused, looked directly at Haru, and smiled. Not with mockery, not with pity, but with the serene joy of someone who had just witnessed the perfect metaphor blossom in real time. He said nothing, just continued. Some understand through effort, some through stillness, and some through surrender. The room fell quieter than quiet. The talk continued for 1 hour. Then 2. Haru slept through them all. Blanket folded neatly beside him, zafu beneath him, dreaming perhaps of nothing at all. When the master finished speaking, he bowed once, then left. No dramatic conclusion, no final koan, just stillness. The monks sat in silence for a long while. Some were moved to tears, others scribbled notes. A few just stared into the space where words had been. And Haru, he stirred, woke slowly, rubbed his eyes, looked around, slightly confused, but deeply rested. One of the monks leaned in. "You missed it," he whispered. "The final teaching. Everything." Haru blinked, then smiled, not with embarrassment, not with shame, but with a kind of peace that surprised even him. "I think I got it," he said, and somehow he had. The exhaustion he had always fought was gone. The restlessness, the need to earn, to prove, to stay alert every second, all of it had dissolved while he slept, blanket folded, zafu beneath him, in the presence of truth that asked nothing from him except his being. From that day on, Haru no longer apologized for his drowsiness. He walked a little slower, sat a little deeper, smiled a little more at those who tried so hard to keep up, and though he still nodded off from time to time, no one teased him anymore. They saw the way he listened, not with his ears, but with his breath. He had become a kind of teaching himself, the kind that doesn't speak, but rests. So tonight, if you too feel tired, not lazy, not unworthy, just deeply, soulfully tired, then know, there is nothing wrong with you. You are not missing the moment. You are not behind. You may simply be approaching awakening through surrender, through softness, through rest. The blanket is beside you. The zafu is waiting. The talk has already begun. But you may rest anyway. And in doing so, you may discover what all the words were trying to say from the beginning. That you are already held, already enough, already home, even in sleep, especially in sleep, because sometimes he who rests awakens first. There are nights when the moon feels closer, as if it knows you are watching, as if it too has something to let go of. You sit by the window, curtains drawn, eyes caught between reflection and sky, and for a moment you forget what is real. The mind does that. It wants to believe the shimmer on the surface is the light's true source. But tonight, let us step quietly into a dream the monks once told, a story not of stars, but of their illusions, not of water, but of what we see in it. It begins with a novice, freshly robed, barefoot in spring. His duties were humble: fetch water, sweep leaves, bow often, but his heart was restless, always looking upward. Each evening, he wandered to the edge of the well with an empty pail and a head full of questions. One night, as he lowered the wooden bucket, he saw it. The moon, perfect, suspended in the water below. He gasped, held his breath, and in that moment, something inside him believed he had caught the moon. He pulled the rope, hand over hand, each motion trembling with awe, and as the bucket rose, so did his joy, until the rim broke the surface, and the moon vanished. Only water, only weight, only reflection lost. He stared, lowered the bucket again. There it was, whole, still shining, and again gone, again and gone. The more he tried to possess it, the more it slipped through. He wept, not for the moon, but for the feeling of wanting what could not be held. The master found him there, kneeling by the well, hands wet, eyes searching shadows. He said nothing, only placed a blanket over the boy's shoulders and waited. The boy spoke first. "Why does it let me see it, if I cannot keep it?" The master knelt beside him. His eyes held the same moonlight. "Because it is not meant to be caught," he said, "only known." The boy looked down at the pail, its water rippling from his shaking hands. "But it felt so real," he whispered. The master nodded. "Illusion always does." They sat in silence, not to wait for answers, but to feel them. Above them, the real moon drifted silently through clouds, unaffected by being misunderstood. The boy wanted to say more, but his words no longer knew what they were chasing, so he let them go. The master dipped a ladle into the pail, drank slowly, then handed it to the boy. "Drink," he said. "Not the moon, just the water." The boy obeyed, and somehow that simple act felt like a ceremony. Later, in the stillness of his room, he unrolled a blank scroll, not to write sutras, not to recite lessons, just to look at the emptiness. Because now he understood. Sometimes clarity doesn't come from what is spoken, but from what remains uncarved. He lay down. The moonlight spilled across the floorboards. He did not chase it. He only watched. He only breathed. The seasons passed. The well grew moss along its rim. The pail aged, its wood silvered by rain, and the boy grew taller, quieter. He still fetched water, still bowed. But each time he passed the well, he smiled as if greeting an old illusion. He no longer tried to catch the moon, but sometimes he would sit nearby and let its reflection waver in the water, not as a prize, not as a goal, but as a mirror of everything in him that once ached to grasp what could not be held. And in that surrender, he found peace. There are things in life meant to be witnessed, not owned. Love, joy, grief, time. They shimmer, they visit, they pass, and still we are whole. So if tonight you are grieving something that slipped away, or longing for a light just out of reach, let it ripple, let it glow, let it remain untouchable. You do not need to hold the moon to be guided by it. You do not need to catch beauty to be changed by it. The bucket is still useful, the water still nourishes, the light was never inside it. It was always inside you. And now, as the wind quiets, as the mind slows, as the night folds around your breath like silk, let go of the chasing. The moon is still here, and so are you. There comes a moment on the path when everything you built to become free begins to feel like a cage. Even your healing, even your wisdom, even the name you were once proud to carry. The robe you wear becomes too heavy, not because it is wrong, but because it no longer fits the one you are becoming. Tonight, you are not asked to improve. You are asked to burn. This is the story of a monk who did just that. Not out of anger, not in rejection, but in peace. Fierce peace. He arrived at the monastery as a boy, traumatized, quiet, heavy with stories no one else could see. The monks gave him robes, a new name, a bowl, and he took to the life with devotion. He memorized sutras, knew the rhythm of bells like breath. He found comfort in the ritual, safety in the stillness, a home inside the silence. But he also found identity. He became the peaceful one, the quiet one, the wise one. They meant it as praise, but over time it became a shell. He could not grieve loudly. He could not rage. He could not be lost again. The robe had become more than fabric. It had become performance, a costume stitched from his own survival. Until one night, he walked into the forest carrying only silence and flint. He knelt before a stone-lined pit, a place where offerings were sometimes made, and he folded his robes with care. He did not curse them, he bowed to them, and then he set them on fire. The flames did not roar, they whispered. The cloth caught slowly, like it too was reluctant to let go. He watched it burn, not with pride, not with shame, but with stillness. Ash curled upward like breath returning. The fire lit the trees, but nothing else stirred. He did not know what came next, but that was the point. He slept beneath the stars that night, wrapped in nothing but moonlight. And in the morning, when the other monks found him, they did not scold. They bowed, not to rebellion, but to truth, because they knew some robes are earned, some are shed, and some are burned when the soul outgrows the story. He walked barefoot back to the temple, his body the same, but his presence changed. He no longer needed to be the peaceful one. He no longer feared being misunderstood. He cried when he needed to. He laughed loudly. He bowed not because he had to, but because something real kept bowing through him. Years later, new monks arrived. One was restless, another afraid. They asked him what practice healed him most, what sutra opened his heart. He said, "The night I burned the robe." They waited for more, but he only smiled, because some truths can't be taught, only lived. He no longer gave long answers. He let the fire in his eyes speak for itself. He no longer wore robes, just soft linen, plain, unimpressive. But when he walked into a room, the silence bowed before him, because he was no longer attached to being seen as anything. He had become nothing that could be praised or torn down. Just breath, just presence, just peace, fierce peace. So, if tonight you feel bound by what you thought you had to be, if the image you carry has become heavier than your truth, fold it gently, bow to it, then set it down, set it alight. You do not need the old robe to walk into the next chapter. You are not your story, not your title, not even your healing. You are what remains after the fire, and what remains cannot be burned. You may not realize it yet, but you've lived most of your life inside a gate that was never locked. Not a cage, not a cell, but a quiet, invisible barrier built by belief. It didn't keep you from moving, it just whispered, "You shouldn't," and you listened. Not because you were weak, but because you were taught to. Tonight, that ends, not with force, but with realization. Let me tell you the story of a monk who stayed in a courtyard far longer than he needed to. He was not young anymore, not new to the path. He had done the work, chanted every dawn, swept every stone. Saturday, until his knees ached with questions and breath. But something in him still waited to be chosen, waited to be certain, waited to be worthy of stepping beyond. The monastery had a western gate, old, iron, framed by moss and fog. No one used it. It wasn't forbidden, just forgotten. He passed it daily, always with averted eyes. Until one morning, after years of walking circles around the same garden, he stopped. Something felt different. Not in the gate, in him. He stepped closer, studied its hinges, touched the cold metal, and realized there was no lock. There never had been. He stepped back, confused. He had never asked, never tried, never questioned why he stayed. He simply assumed, that gate is not for me. But it was open. It had always been open. And now, every step he had ever taken within the courtyard sounded different in memory, as if echoing against a wall that was never there. The master appeared beside him, as if conjured by silence. The monk turned, startled. "Why did no one tell me?" The master looked at the gate, then back to him. You never asked. That night, he couldn't sleep. Not from excitement, not from fear, from the strange ache of having believed something false for so long. He lay under his thin blanket, listening to the wind move through the eaves, remembering all the times he felt caged, not by stone, but by thought. Every moment he silenced his desire. Every time he bowed, not from reverence, but from self-doubt. He thought of the gate as a question, not an answer. And in that question something broke free. The next morning, he woke before the bells. He did not fold his robes with the usual precision. He let the wind dress him. He carried no bowl. He bowed to no one. He simply walked, not away, but through the courtyard, through the memory, through the stories that told him freedom had to be earned. The fog clung to the ground as he approached the gate. It looked the same, still open, still silent, but now it no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a mirror. He touched it once more, not to check, to thank. And then, with breath slow and steady, he stepped beyond. Nothing exploded. No bells rang. The world did not change. But he did, because now he knew most walls are drawn in chalk, most cages are made of stories, and most of the time, what binds us has no key because it has no lock. It has only belief, and belief can be released. He wandered for days, not to escape, to remember. He found rivers that had no names, mountains without footprints. He slept beneath stars not labeled by scripture, and something inside him that had always been tight unraveled. He laughed more, not loudly, but freely. He no longer asked permission to feel joy. He no longer feared being wrong. He began to teach, but not with words, with presence, with silence, with the space he now carried around him like an open sky. When asked where he trained, he simply said, "At the gate." Some laughed, some walked away. But a few began to wonder, what gate have I never tested? What lock have I assumed was there? What belief still guards me from my own freedom? So if tonight you feel enclosed, boxed in by memory, trapped by identity, go to the gate. Touch it. Ask if it's really locked, and if it isn't, walk. Not with anger, not with defiance, but with quiet awe at how free you always were. The fog will clear, the breath will deepen, and the story of your life will begin again beyond the gate where you were never not allowed to go. There is a strength so quiet, most never see it. It does not shout. It does not clench its fists. It bends, it bows, and it does not break. Tonight, you may feel like collapsing, and that is holy, because not all collapse is failure. Some is just the body remembering how to yield. Let me tell you a story of a monk who once thought resilience meant being unmoved. He was strong in the way stone is strong, sharp, still, unshaken in the wind. He had learned to endure everything: silence, suffering, loneliness. But when the typhoon came, the stones shifted, and one of them cracked. The temple flooded. The wind took the roof tiles like leaves, and the monk, who had never bowed to anything, fell to his knees, not from fear, but from something softer, a question: why did I try so hard to stay upright? The storm passed, as all storms do, and in its wake, only one thing remained untouched: a grove of bamboo, just beyond the temple wall. They had bent so low, their tips kissed the soaked earth. But they had not broken, not a single stalk. The monk visited the grove the next morning, his robe still damp, his spirit softer than before. He stepped between the stalks, watching how they moved, even now, in the gentle breeze. Always moving, always returning. He touched one, felt the water still clinging to its skin, and for the first time he realized, this is strength too, Not the kind built in stone, not the kind praised in warriors, but the kind that survives, the kind that learns how to lean. He sat in the grove until the sun dried the moss, and in that silence, a lesson bloomed. That resilience does not always look like holding form. Sometimes it looks like softening. He remembered the years he held in tears, how they pressed against his ribs, how he clenched his jaw to protect his image of strength. But now, surrounded by bamboo, he let them fall. And in their falling, something opened. He did not collapse. He unfolded. The old monk who taught him once said, "If you cannot break, you cannot bend, and if you cannot bend, you will break." Now he understood. He stayed in the grove until night. Moonlight pooled on the wet leaves, and all around him the bamboo glistened. Alive, unbroken, beautiful because of how they moved. He returned to the temple different, not weaker, not stronger, just truer. He no longer corrected his posture when he felt himself sway. He let his voice waver during chanting. He let grief come through without apology, and others noticed. Not his softness, but his presence. He was still there, but more so, more rooted, more fluid, like something had grown beneath his surface that needed no explanation. When a young monk asked him how he survived the storm, he smiled and pointed to the grove. "I remembered the bamboo. So, if tonight you feel bent or weary or on the edge of snapping, let go, not of yourself, but of the need to stay rigid. Let the wind pass through. Let your breath move with it. You can yield without giving up. You can bow without breaking. The storm may be fierce, but so is the quiet strength of something still standing after it all." He returned to the grove many times after, sometimes in the rain, sometimes when his heart was heavy again. He learned to sit close to the stalks and listen not for sound, but for wisdom carried in the space between movements. The bamboo never told him what to do. It showed him how to be. When change came, he no longer resisted it. When sorrow came, he no longer armored against it. He became like the grove itself, a place people could enter and remember how not to shatter. He taught nothing, but others changed around him. He had become the lesson, and so can you. You do not need to rebuild all at once. You only need to stay rooted and let yourself move. Let tears come. Let knees bend. Let spine curve beneath the pressure, because still you will rise. Still you will glisten in the moonlight. Let your strength be soft. Let your survival be sacred. And let the wind remember you as the bamboo that did not break, the breath that carried the mountain. There are mountains you cannot climb, not with your feet, not with your mind, only with breath. You may not know how long you've carried it. A weight behind the ribs, a pressure beneath the skin, not heavy like stone, but heavy like memory. Tonight, the mountain is not outside you. It is not to be conquered. It is not to be named. It is only to be exhaled. There once was a monk who could not pray. Every time he sat to chant, his voice caught in his throat. Every time he tried to focus, his chest ached, his hands trembled, his thoughts raced. He blamed himself. He tried harder, fasted longer, slept on wooden boards, but the mountain did not move. Until one evening, after days without speaking, he wandered to the edge of the monastery cliff. The sun was low, the clouds pink with their own surrender, and beneath him, a sea of mist veiled the mountains like breath. He sat. He did not chant. He did not try. He simply breathed, in, out, again and again. At first, it felt like failure, but the longer he breathed, the more the mountain inside him began to dissolve. Not disappear, not solve itself, just soften, as if breath knew what thought never could, as if breath had been carrying him all along. The monk returned to the same spot every morning, not to pray, not to fix, just to breathe. He watched the mountain change colors with the sun. He watched the fog move like thoughts that came and went without clinging. Some mornings, he wept, not from sadness, but from release. The breath was showing him something no scripture ever had, that the way through suffering was not over it, not around it, not beneath it, but with it, with breath, beside sorrow, within stillness. He remembered something the old abbot once whispered after a night of sleeplessness: "You do not need to carry the mountain. You only need to let the breath carry you." At the time, he did not understand, but now, his chest open, his body soft, he began to feel what those words had always meant. One morning, as he sat, mist curled around his ankles. He could no longer tell where mountain ended and breath began. He inhaled, and it felt as if the whole mountain moved with him. He exhaled, and it felt as if 10,000 sorrows left quietly. No need for stories, no need for answers, just the breath, rising, falling, like wind through pines, like waves through sky, like time through the body of a soul no longer rushing to arrive. He began to notice, even when thoughts returned, breath remained. Even when grief knocked again, breath opened the door. Even when nothing made sense, the next breath did not ask why. It simply arrived and carried. Some days, the sorrow returned, without warning, like mist creeping through the doorway before the temple walls had warmed. The monk felt it not as thought, but as a trembling just beneath the ribs, a heaviness that seemed to ask, "Why are you still here? Why haven't you healed?" And for the first time, he did not argue. He did not run. He did not chant louder to drown it out. He simply breathed with it, and something changed. The sorrow did not vanish, but it loosened, as if the breath had made room for it, without judgment. He realized he had been afraid of the mountain not because of its height, but because of his shame for still standing beneath it. He believed he should have been over it by now, stronger by now, lighter by now. But the breath didn't care about time. The breath didn't scold. It simply arrived, again and again, like a friend who doesn't ask you to smile when you can't. One morning, he knelt in the fog, palms resting on his knees, and whispered aloud, "I don't know how to carry this." And the wind answered with stillness. A single inhale, a single exhale, and suddenly he understood. You do not have to carry it, you only have to breathe with it. The breath does not remove the mountain. It reminds you that you were never meant to hold the whole thing at once. Just this moment, just this breath. That is all you ever truly carry. And slowly, without instruction, the monk began to walk again, not to escape, not to prove, but simply because his breath was ready to move. And with every step, it was not his feet but his breath that carried the mountain, not by lifting it but by not resisting it, not by changing it but by allowing it to exist without becoming him. The seasons changed, but the breath did not. Even when the winds turned colder, even when snow kissed the mountain's face, the monk still returned to sit, not to master breathing, but to be mastered by it. Each breath a small bow, a sacred rhythm not taught by scripture, but by surrender. He began to notice something else. The younger monks, curious, started sitting beside him. They asked questions at first. What technique do you use? How long should we sit? What do you visualize? He smiled and answered only, "Let the mountain teach you." Some understood, some did not. But all of them sat, and one by one, they began to feel what cannot be explained, that the deepest teachers do not speak, and the deepest strength requires no resistance. One night, a storm rolled in fierce, sudden, full of thunder that cracked the sky. The young monks ran to close windows, tie tarps, protect what they could. But when the storm passed and the air went quiet, they found the old monk still seated beneath the open sky, his robes wet with rain, his breath undisturbed. He did not fight the storm. He breathed through it. And that night, no one asked questions. They only sat with him and breathed. Because there are some truths that must be lived to be known. The monk was not special. He had not been chosen. He had only listened long enough to remember that breath is not something you do. It is something that does you. It is the mountain's way of keeping you close, the wind's way of speaking through you, the body's way of surviving what the mind cannot solve. So tonight, if something feels too heavy, do not try to carry it. Breathe. And if that does not feel like enough, breathe again. Not because it solves anything, but because it carries you even when you do not know where you are going. The mountain is not moved by force. It is softened by presence. And you do not need to rise above it. You only need to remain with it, breath by breath, until it no longer feels like a prison, only a place you are finally allowed to rest. There is a kind of warmth that asks for nothing in return, not your gratitude, not your improvement, not your usefulness, just warmth for the sake of warmth. Tonight, your heart may ache from all the things you've done to be useful, all the ways you've tried to earn your place, all the invisible fires you've lit in the hopes someone might say, "Yes, you matter now." But what if there was a fire that burned for no reason but love? There once lived an old monk in a monastery pressed deep into the mountain's ribs. The winters were long, the winds unkind, the nights unvisited. He was not the abbot, not the scholar, not the leader of chants. He was just the one who lit the fire, not for the kitchen, not for a festival, not for tea or prayer. He lit the fire in the large meditation hall every evening when the snow began to fall sideways and the roof groaned with cold. There were no announcements, no gathering bells, no signs. He walked in, placed logs with slow hands, and lit them one breath at a time. The room filled with golden warmth, flickering across the wood beams, licking gently at the dark corners. And then he sat. No one came. Not the first night, not the second. Still, he lit the fire. The younger monks began to notice. They whispered questions over evening meals. Why does he light the fire when no one comes? Why waste the wood? Why tend a flame that cooks nothing? But the monk never answered. He wasn't trying to be mysterious. He simply had no words for the kind of offering that doesn't explain itself. Until one night, a young novice entered the empty hall. He was restless, his mind noisy with striving, his heart aching from all the ways he hadn't yet become enough. He sat beside the monk in silence. For a long time, they said nothing, and then quietly he asked, "Why do you light the fire if no one is here?" The monk looked at him, eyes soft as ash. "You are here." The novice blinked. "But I wasn't here the other nights." The monk smiled, but the warmth was. He placed another log into the flame. Some fires are not lit for people. They are lit for presence. The novice fell silent, not because he understood, but because something in his chest had stopped tightening. They sat there, two figures bathed in glow, inside a warmth that asked for nothing, and in its asking nothing, gave everything. The next night, the fire was lit again, and the novice returned. Still, no one else came. Still, nothing was cooked. Still, no reason was spoken. But the room felt like a prayer that had forgotten its words and remembered its meaning. One night, snowstorm winds rattled the outer halls. The doors moaned. The cold bit through robes. Yet there the fire was alive. The monk was already there, eyes closed, palms open toward the warmth. The novice sat beside him again, but this time he brought no questions, only breath. Later, a third monk wandered in, then a fourth. They said nothing, just sat, one by one, drawn not by reason, but by something softer, a kind of wordless permission to exist without proving anything. The fire became not a tool, not a ritual, but a presence. Something that simply was. Something that reminded them, you do not have to be used to be sacred. You do not have to be needed to be enough. One evening, the abbot appeared. He stood in the back of the hall, watching. The fire crackled. The monks breathed. He approached the old firekeeper and asked gently, "What is the purpose of this practice?" The monk turned to him without hesitation. "To remind us that the most generous acts are sometimes the least efficient." The abbot nodded and did not disturb the silence again. The monks continued to gather, never summoned, never instructed. They came because something in the flame felt familiar, like a kindness they didn't have to deserve. Sometimes no one came at all. Still, the fire was lit, because some things are not lit for eyes. They are lit for eternity, for mystery, for the quiet soul who will one day arrive without knowing why and realize they have come home. Years passed. The firekeeper grew slower. His hands shook slightly when placing logs, but he never missed a night. When asked why he continued, he only said, "Because one day someone will arrive cold and not even know it until they feel the warmth." He did not need applause. He did not need disciples. He did not even need to know if the fire made a difference. He only needed to keep lighting it. One winter, the monk fell ill. The younger monks noticed no fire was lit. That night, the hall was empty, cold creeping in like doubt, until a novice stood, without being asked, and lit the hearth. He didn't know how to stack the wood quite right. The flame took longer to catch, but it caught, and others came, quietly, gratefully. And though no words were spoken, something sacred passed between them. The understanding that not all flames are for function. Some are just to remind us that warmth is still possible. The firekeeper passed a few days later. No plaque was made in his honor. No great ceremony was held. But the fire was lit that night, and the next, and the next. Years into the future, monks would ask, "Why do we light this fire if no one uses it?" And the elder monks would smile and say, "Someone will, and even if they don't, the warmth will be here waiting." Just like grace, just like breath, just like love with no recipient, no purpose, no reason but offered anyway. Tonight, you do not need to justify your existence. You do not need to explain why you are tired, or what your worth is, or how you will be of service tomorrow. Tonight, you are the fire, and that is enough. And now, you rest. Some people live like closed fists, tight with protection, heavy with what they carry, afraid to let go, as if release would mean losing themselves. But you are not meant to live clenched. You came into this world with open palms, soft, trusting, ready to give before you were taught to hold. And somewhere along the way, you began to close, to grip love like a rope, to hold rest like a possession, to save your softness for the rare few who earned it. But love does not disappear when given. Rest does not lessen when shared. Stillness is not lost when passed from hand to hand. There once lived a monk with nothing of his own, no robe that fit just right, no cup with his name, no corner of the monastery that he called his. Yet, somehow, he was always full. They called him the Open One, because whenever anyone came to him cold, tired, confused, he gave something, a blanket, a word, a silent gaze. His seat, he gave with such peace, it didn't look like sacrifice. It looked like breath. One day, a traveling monk arrived after many weeks through mountain snow. His shoes were cracked, his lips split from wind, his eyes unsure whether he belonged anywhere. The others offered nods, some warm rice, and polite instruction. But the Open One removed his own robe without a word, and placed it over the traveler's shoulders. The traveler protested, "You'll be cold." The monk smiled, "I have a fire inside." The next morning he offered his cushion during meditation, later his tea, then his space in the sleeping quarters. At every turn he gave, not because he was saintly, not because he wanted praise, but because his hands had learned a secret truth. The more you close your hands, the heavier the world becomes. The more you open them, the more it flows through without wounding. Others watched him in confusion. Where did his energy come from? How did he not run out? One younger monk asked, "Don't you ever feel empty?" The open one simply opened his palms, held them out toward the rising sun, and said, "Not once, because nothing I've given was ever mine to keep." The wind passed through his fingers as if affirming the lesson. You do not need to store up warmth like a vault. You are not a container. You are a flame, and flames share their heat without ever becoming less fire. There came a season of hardship. The crops failed. The river froze earlier than expected. Illness moved like wind between the stone walls of the monastery. Everyone began to withdraw. Hunched over their bowls, they took smaller sips of tea, pulled their robes tighter, shared fewer words. Even kindness grew cautious. And still, the open one gave. He shared half his meals, carried water for the sick, Saturday beside the grieving without flinching. One evening, a fellow monk approached him in frustration. "Why do you give so much? Can't you see we have nothing to spare?" The open one paused, looked down at his palms, turned them toward the firelight, and replied, "When I give from fear, I empty. But when I give from love, I become a path." The other monk scoffed. "A path leads somewhere. Where does your giving lead? To the place where no one feels forgotten." He did not argue. He did not try to be right. He simply placed another log in the fire and warmed the hands of a coughing novice without being asked. That night, he did not eat. He had given his portion away, but he slept with a face as peaceful as the moon, watching over an empty field. You see, not all fullness comes from possession. Some comes from release, from knowing that nothing you give in love can ever truly leave you. There were days he was exhausted, but never bitter. Days he had little to offer, but he still offered presence. His body remained soft, his voice steady, because he had made peace with not being a container of blessings, but a current through which they passed. Others began to notice that when they sat with him, something softened inside them too. A gentleness, a loosening. They began giving more, not out of duty, but because it felt like breathing again. The monastery began to warm in small, quiet ways, not from abundance, but from shared emptiness that no longer feared itself. The open one never kept track of what he gave, who received, what was fair. He said, "A closed hand holds little, but an open one holds the whole sky." As seasons turned and years passed, the monks aged, robes frayed, old chants faded like wind over stone. But the open one remained unchanged, not in body, but in spirit. His eyes still carried the soft light of someone who had nothing to protect. One winter he fell ill, too weak to rise, too tired to light the evening candles. He lay in his small room, hands still open on the mat beside him. The monks gathered in silence. There was no fear in the air, only quiet reverence. One whispered, "He's given everything." Another replied, "Then he must be the richest among us." And though his breath was shallow, the open one smiled, as if he had heard every word. The youngest monk in the temple brought him warm tea, knelt beside him and said, "Your hands have given everything, but now they are still. How will you give now?" The old monk turned his palms gently toward the ceiling, toward nothing, toward everything, and with his final breath he whispered, "Even now, I give you peace." He did not close his hands, not even then. They buried him beneath the old cherry tree, the one that bloomed even in lean years. And each spring, as petals drifted into the temple garden, the monks would say, "He is still giving." The tradition remained, not as rule, not as ritual, but as remembrance. New monks would arrive, stiff with the need to prove, tight with the fear of not being enough, and an elder would take them to the candlelit hall, hold out their hands empty, open, and say, "Begin here." And slowly, as seasons softened their hearts, they would learn. To give does not mean to lose. To open does not mean to break. To offer is not to vanish. It is to return. To return to what you always were before the world asked you to grip so tightly. So tonight, if your heart feels closed, if your soul feels forgotten, if your kindness has been tucked away for fear it will not be returned, let your palms fall open. You do not need to hold on. You do not need to withhold. You do not need to protect your warmth as if there is not more where it came from. There is always more when you do not clutch it. Love is not lost when given. Rest is not lessened when shared. And you are never emptied by being soft. Let go. There is something that remains long after a body is gone. Not memory, not story, but gesture. The gesture of giving. The way a hand stays open in the mind of another, like a candle that never quite burns out. Years after the open one left this world, his hands remained. In the way tea was poured for a guest before pouring for oneself. In the way doors were held open without looking back. In the way blankets were folded and left quietly for someone who had not asked. No monument was built. But the monastery became different. Not louder, not holier, just softer. You could feel it in the walls. The way they did not press. The way they held silence without shame. The newest monks, those born long after his final breath, still found themselves spreading their palms by instinct, still heard the whisper of firelight when offering their seat to someone more tired, still lit lanterns that no one would see except the one traveler who needed it most. This was how the teaching lived, not through sermons, not through sutras, but through the hush that followed small kindnesses, the hush that said, "You do not owe the world your usefulness, only your presence, only the willingness to remain soft when it would be easier to turn hard. And when the world feels heavy again, as it surely will somewhere, someone will remember an old monk's hands turned gently to the sky and think to themselves, this too can be offered. Your open hands may not be seen, may not be thanked, may not be understood, but they are holy. And their blessing does not depend on recognition, only on the grace of never closing. So stay soft, even when no one notices. Stay open, even when the world forgets how to receive. Let your kindness have no ledger. Let your love be free to move without destination, and let the silence around you do what it was always meant to do, hold you like open hands that have never forgotten how to give without condition. Not all endings need to be spoken. Some just dissolve quietly into the warmth you never stopped offering, and from here you can simply breathe. There is an old lantern by the bottom steps of the mountain temple, carved from stone, weathered by decades of rain, snow, and the passing of silent feet. No one lights it anymore. Its hollow center once held flame. Now it holds nothing but wind and memory. And yet it stands, unmoved, unbothered, unneeded, and still it stands. In the early winter morning, before the monks stir their rice, before the birds begin their soft calling, there is a hush that wraps the whole temple in pale light and fog. It is in this hour that the lantern becomes most holy. You would miss it if you were rushing, if you were climbing the steps for some important task, head down, mind full. You'd pass by what you thought was stone and never know you were walking past prayer. But if you paused just for a breath, you might feel it. Not its light, not its heat, but its presence. the stillness of something that no longer needs to prove its purpose. It does not light the path, and still it is part of the path. It does not speak, and still it teaches. It has become a form of grace too quiet to notice unless you've let the noise inside you settle. There is a monk who bows to the lantern each morning, not out of superstition, not because the lantern grants wishes, but because he understands what it means to be useful once and forgotten later. He too has passed the age of proving himself. He used to carry water buckets up steep stairs. Now his knees tremble after a single flight. He once led chants with a voice clear as temple bells. Now his breath catches between syllables. He used to be sought out for guidance, for stories, for answers. Now the novices bow out of courtesy, not curiosity. And yet, he too stands. He rises before the others, wraps his thin robe around thinning skin, and bows to the lantern that no longer shines because it is no longer needed. But not all light comes from flame. Not all purpose comes from use. Some things are holy simply because they have remained, because they have weathered, because they are still here. He rests his palm on the cold stone base, and it feels like touching a kind of stillness he longs to become. He does not ask the lantern to return to its duty. He does not wish it were younger. He does not imagine how it once glowed. He only stands beside it in shared silence, like two elders who know that their sacredness no longer depends on being seen. And as snow begins to fall again, light as breath, cold as ash, he lets it cover his shoulders like a blessing he no longer needs to explain. There is a certain kind of reverence that is not taught, only discovered after many winters. The kind that arises when you realize your value is no longer in motion, but in stillness. The younger monks, eager and full of wind, often pass the old monk without seeing him. They speak of enlightenment like a mountain to climb. They chant with vigor, sweep the halls with purpose, fill the silence with effort. They mean no harm. They simply do not yet know what it means to endure without burning. The old monk watches them, but offers no correction. He remembers being that fire once. He remembers believing that if you were not useful, you were nothing. That your worth must be proven in sweat, in perfect posture, in memorized sutras. But now, he understands the lantern. He understands how even the things no longer called upon can still be sacred. The lantern has not moved in decades, and yet it remains a part of the temple's breath. A stillness the wind cannot shake, a witness no one thinks to thank. And this is the teaching he never says aloud. That there is grace in being overlooked, that holiness does not retire when recognition does. One evening, a storm blows over the mountain, wind howls through the trees. Snow gathers in corners, drifts against doors. Monks retreat into the meditation hall, wrapping themselves in silence and cloth. The old monk steps outside. His robe is thin, his bones fragile, but he walks slowly, certainly, down to the temple stairs, to the lantern. Snow has blanketed its crown, weighing it slightly, as if even the sky wanted to bow. He clears the snow gently with the sleeve of his robe, not to reveal the stone, but to remind himself that even covered, even forgotten, the lantern remains. He does not speak, he does not pray, he simply stands beside it as the storm rages. Two figures, one made of stone, one made of skin, both untouched by the urgency that blows through the world. He stays there for a long time, until the wind softens, until the snowlight turns blue, until he remembers that the point was never to endure but to endure with peace. When he returns to the hall, his footsteps leave no sound, no trail, no explanation, but the next morning, the snow atop the lantern is gone, and one of the youngest monks, without knowing why, pauses before it on his way to meditation. He doesn't bow. He doesn't even understand. But something in him slows. Something in him remembers how to stand without striving. Years pass, as quietly as snowfall. The old monk moves less now. He sits longer on the temple porch, wrapped in silence and thin blankets. The tasks he once carried are carried by others, and still he smiles. Not with achievement, not with pride, but with the soft, secret joy of someone who no longer needs to be known. He watches the seasons change the way a mountain watches clouds. Without involvement, without claim, only wonder. Sometimes, in the depth of winter, the wind speaks through the temple beams. It hums like a memory. And the monk recalls the first time he saw the lantern. He was a novice, barely 16. He had climbed the steps with aching feet and a mind full of noise. He remembered rushing past it, seeing only a stone, something in the way. He had not known what it would one day mean to him, and now he wonders how many things he has passed without seeing their holiness. How many people, how many moments, how many quiet graces stood like stone lanterns while he ran toward light. But now he knows, even unlit, they were burning. Even unused, they were blessings. Even forgotten, they were never unworthy. One evening, a child arrives at the temple, brought by a mother who cannot care for her alone. The monks offer her a place, a mat, a robe, a new name. She is too young to understand the rituals, too small to sit long in stillness. But she watches everything, especially the old monk. She watches how he smiles, even when others forget him, how he moves like the wind was part of his breath. One morning, she follows him down the stairs before dawn. He does not notice her until he reaches the lantern, and when he turns, she is there, small hands full of snow. She presses it gently to the base of the lantern, as if offering it something. He kneels beside her, his knees aching, his breath short, and together they sit in the silence. The lantern does not glow, it has not in decades, and yet in that moment everything is lit. The snow, the child's eyes, the old man's smile, the path no one else is walking. This is not legacy, this is not teaching, this is transmission without language. Stillness passed hand to hand like breath. You may wonder, what use is a stone that does not shine? What worth is a person no longer called upon? What remains when function is gone? But that is the illusion. You were never meant to be useful forever. You were meant to be here, to remain, to witness, to become the stillness others didn't know they needed. And if you have ever felt too tired to matter, too unseen to shine, too forgotten to hold meaning, may you remember the lantern, covered in snow, unlit, unmoving, but still standing in grace. And may you know in your own quiet way, you are that sacred too. Not because you do, but because you are. And even now, beneath the soft weight of your weariness, you remain a light no storm can erase. Let that be enough. Let stillness be your offering. Let the world pass by. You are still here. There is a room in the oldest wing of the temple. Few enter it. Even fewer speak of it. It has no altar, no incense, no scrolls. Only a mirror, framed in cedar, hung low upon the wall. The mirror is plain, not polished to shine. Its surface is soft with time misted with age, like breath on glass. And when the sun rises just right, its light catches the edge but never the center. It is said, this mirror was not made to show faces. It was made to show what remains when the face is forgotten. One monk, quiet even among monks, went to sit with the mirror each dawn, not to groom, not to reflect, not to fix anything broken, but to dissolve something he could not name. He would enter before the others stirred, feet bare against the cold floor, robe loose, mind empty as the pre-dawn hush. He never lit a lamp. He sat, and watched, not the mirror, but the space inside it. At first, he saw what anyone sees: his brow, his eyes, the slight curl of mouth, the tiredness behind all of it. But then, as stillness gathered, as the room lost its edges, his image began to blur. Not from magic, not from mysticism, but from soft awareness that what he saw was not what he was. His reflection remained, but its importance dissolved. What he believed to be himself suddenly felt like mist on glass, visible, but insubstantial. He would watch as the face became less a person, more a presence. Not male, not young, not teacher, not seeker, just a gaze, a breath, a single ripple on a pond that no longer needed a name. Some mornings, tears would fall, not from sorrow but from the quiet ache of unbecoming, from the slow unraveling of every idea he'd ever held about himself, who he was, what he needed, where he had failed. All of it just a condensation on the surface of a mirror that had never once asked him to be anything. And in that stillness he found not loss, but space, a vastness he could not cling to because there was nothing left to cling with. He began to understand why the room had no offerings, no chants, no teachings. The mirror was the teaching. It did not reflect to show you what you are. It reflected to show you what you are not. The days passed as monks counted them not in numbers, but in sunrises, bowls of rice, and the quiet softening of the self. The monk continued his visits. Each morning, he would return to the mirror that never praised him, never condemned, never held anything but the moment. Some mornings, his image would appear more solid, as if ego had crept back in during the night. A subtle tightening of the eyes, a flicker of self-doubt, a memory he clutched like a name badge he forgot to remove. But the mirror never resisted. It let him appear, fade, return, and dissolve again. And through this rhythm, he learned something deeper than wisdom. He learned presence without position. He stopped thinking of himself as a monk, or a man, or a mind on the path. He began to feel like breath inside the wind, like space inside the bowl. When asked why he visited that room, he would only smile and point to the steam rising from tea. No self, no answer, only the warmth of something passing through. One morning, a younger monk followed him, not to disturb, but out of that quiet longing that lives in all who suffer from the weight of identity. The young monk had been struggling with his thoughts, with his image, with the quiet violence of trying to be good enough. He hoped the older monk would teach him something, a mantra, a breath technique, a silent instruction to erase the pain. But the older monk said nothing. He only motioned for the young one to sit. They sat together before the mirror, in the hush of a world that had not yet begun to need them. And as the sun crept slowly through the paper walls, the mirror showed them both, one face beginning, the other ending. One still trying to become someone, the other finally free from trying at all. And the younger monk, with tears not of sadness, but of quiet undoing, whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." The older monk closed his eyes and nodded. "Then you are close." The mirror said nothing, but in its silence, it confirmed everything. Because the ones who say, "I am," have not yet entered, but the ones who whisper, "I'm not sure anymore," are brushing the edge of the sacred, nameless. That morning, the younger monk did not need saving. He needed dissolving. And that is what the mirror gave him, not answers, but spaciousness, not form, but freedom. He stopped asking what his role was. He stopped needing to matter. And the fog on the mirror, for a single breathless moment, was not mist but mercy. The seasons shifted as they always do. Spring brought wind, summer brought light, autumn fell quietly in gold, and winter returned like an old story with a softer ending. Still the mirror hung in that quiet room, untouched by time except for the deepening silence around it. The old monk, older, still sat longer now, spoke even less, not out of frailty, but because there was less self to speak from. He no longer needed to visit the mirror. It had become part of him. Or rather, he had become what the mirror revealed. Space, presence, no center, no surface. He would sit beneath trees and feel the same quiet dissolve, as if the world itself had become a mirror, reflecting nothing back but stillness. Sometimes he would smile for no reason. Other times he would cry with no sorrow. He had stopped separating the two, because when the self melts, so do the opposites. One day, the younger monk, now not so young, entered the mirror room alone. The elder had not come that morning. The temple had grown quieter in the way things do when elders begin to fade. The mirror was still there, still misted, still waiting. The monk sat, not to find himself, but to rest in the absence of needing to. And when he looked into the mirror, he did not see a monk. He did not see a name. He did not see a body to fix, a life to organize, a past to justify. He saw space. He saw the breath of no one passing through the form of someone, and it comforted him like nothing else could. That he did not need to hold it all together. That he did not need to keep becoming. That he did not need to heal what was only ever an image in fog. He let out a long, quiet exhale, the kind that empties everything. The mirror did not respond. It never did. And yet everything within him shifted. The fear of losing himself was gone, because there was nothing left to lose. Just this, just breath, just moment, just life, without the need to be anyone inside it. There is a room at the back of the old monastery where no one goes. It is not forbidden, it is not hidden, it is simply forgotten. The wood is darker there, the air thicker. Dust rests on the floor like slow snow. Time itself seems slower, as if breath has never rushed in that place. In the center of the room rests a drum, large, round, covered in layers of silence. Its skin is worn but untouched. Its chords are firm but never stretched in sound. No monk remembers placing it there. No name is written on its base. It has never been struck. And yet it listens. It listens to wind creeping beneath the doors. It listens to footsteps that pass without entering. It listens to seasons through the walls. The drum has heard more by being silent than most hear by speaking. And once, long ago, there was a monk who found the room by accident. He was young then, still swollen with questions, still hungry to prove his value in the language of action. He opened the door to escape his thoughts, but stepped instead into their stillness. The drum stood there, dusty, plain, and patient. He stared at it for a long time, waiting for it to do something, waiting for it to justify its place in the world. He circled it, touched it, wondered what sound it would make if struck, but he didn't strike it. Something about the way it sat, as if waiting not to be used but to be understood, stopped him. He left the room that day without answers. And yet something had changed. He began to notice the pressure he carried, to speak, to move, to create, to prove. He had thought these urges were spiritual, but they were just noise wearing holy clothes. He returned to the room the next day, and the day after, and again, not to strike the drum, not to awaken it, but to sit in the company of something that had nothing to prove. And so he listened too. The monk began to change, not in a way anyone noticed. He still swept the same courtyard, bowed at the same hours, took the same rice into the same bowl. But something inside him was no longer chasing sound. He stopped trying to echo, stopped trying to impress silence with cleverness or form. He no longer felt rushed to offer proof of his practice. He simply practiced. When others burned incense with intention, he lit his stick with breath alone. Not to ascend, not to arrive, only to dissolve. And still he returned to the room of the listening drum. Each time he bowed to it, Not because it had taught him in the way teachings are given, but because it had shown him how to exist without needing applause. The drum became a kind of mirror, one that did not reflect what he was doing, but what he no longer needed to do. He watched its dust gather like prayers unsaid. He watched the sun fall across it without expectation, and he began to wonder how many beings are waiting quietly for someone to hear them without demand. How many hearts have never been struck and yet still carry the rhythm of something sacred. He thought of the trees outside the temple, how they do not bloom for admiration, nor shed their leaves for applause. They live, and that is enough. One day, a fellow monk followed him into the forgotten room. He asked, "Why do you come here?" The monk said nothing, only pointed to the drum. The other laughed softly. "There is no sound," and the monk replied, "Yes, that's why I come." It wasn't a riddle, it wasn't a teaching, it was a letting go. Not all things are waiting to be struck. Some are waiting to be left in peace. And some parts of ourselves, the oldest, the deepest, the most whole, are not asking to be expressed. They are asking to be known without display. Years passed. Seasons cycled through silence, like breath through an old flute. The monk who once felt the need to become was now simply a part of the temple. He had not written verses, he had not given Dharma talks, he had not led pilgrimages or left behind stories for others to remember. And still, he was whole. There is a kind of fullness that grows only in those who have stopped trying to be full. One winter evening, when the wind outside pressed against the old wooden frames, he returned once more to the room of the drum. The silence was thick as candle wax, and the drum, now heavy with dust, stood where it always had, untouched. He bowed to it, not out of habit, but reverence, because something in that drum had always told the truth without ever speaking. It had waited, year after year, in stillness, and that waiting had not made it less sacred, it had made it holy. He sat in front of it and let his hands rest on his lap like empty bowls. He felt the ache that comes not from sorrow but from recognition, that so much within him would never be seen, never be known, never be understood by the world, and that this was not a tragedy but a kind of peace. Not every seed blooms, not every light is a fire, not every rhythm needs to be heard. He wept softly into the silence, not because anything had gone wrong, but because everything had finally been let go, and for a brief moment he thought he heard it, not a sound, but the echo of something that had never needed to ring to be real. The drum did not respond, but it had never needed to. Its stillness had always been enough. The next morning, the monks found the old one sitting in the silent room, his hands folded gently, his breath no longer rising, but his face was peaceful, not like sleep, but like something even quieter. They did not mourn loudly, they did not strike the drum, they did not chant to awaken what had already returned to its source. They simply watched and listened. For something they could not name, the abbot entered last. He stood behind them, his eyes falling on the old monk's body, and then to the dust-covered drum. And after a long silence, he whispered, "Not all offerings are sound." A younger monk stepped forward, the same one who once followed him into the room years ago. He knelt before the drum, not to play it, not to awaken anything, but to clean it, gently. He didn't wipe all the dust away, only a little. Enough to remember. Enough to say, "You mattered even when you made no noise." Outside, the wind paused, as if the world itself was bowing to the unseen rhythm of a life that never asked to be struck to be sacred. The drum remained silent, but in that silence, every monk felt it a sound beyond hearing, a truth beyond language. Some would say the drum was never used, but others who had sat before it would understand. It had been heard without ever needing to speak, and so had he. You too have parts of yourself that have never been played, dreams unexpressed, truths unspoken, tenderness never witnessed. But they are not wasted. You do not need to perform to be real. You do not need to strike to be whole. Even in your stillness, you echo. Even in your silence, you are sacred. You, too, are the drum that waits not to be used, but to be understood. And now, you do not need to prove anything. You only need to rest. The silence has already heard you. There are teachings that do not belong to words. There are moments too wide for memory, too deep for stories. Long after the monks' robes were folded for the last time, the room remained quiet, undisturbed, and the drum unchanged. New monks came. Some passed the room without noticing. Others peeked in, curious about the object that had never been used. But now, there was a kind of hush around it, like the breath between final notes. Some sat beside it, though they did not know why. They felt something heavy and light at once, like longing without sadness, like meaning without need. A few tried to strike it once or twice. The sound was beautiful, low, full, wide like winter wind, but they knew, instantly, that the drum's truest offering was not in the sound but in the waiting. And so, they stopped striking it. They sat instead, as he once had, and slowly, a new kind of silence began to grow in the monastery. It crept into their bowls, into their sweeping, into the way they walked from one moment to the next. No one called it a lesson, no one claimed it as doctrine, but it lived in how they waited without hurry, how they listened without seeking. The drum had become a symbol not of sound, but of stillness that listens, and deeper still of potential that never needed to manifest to be real. Because isn't there a kind of holiness in what remains untouched? Not out of fear but reverence? You too carry such places inside, rooms not yet entered, ideas not yet spoken, feelings you never gave names to. They are not failures, they are not lost. They are the drum in your chest that was never struck but always beating, waiting, not for applause, but for presence. Let this moment be that presence. You don't have to speak, you don't have to be useful, you don't even have to be heard, you only have to be here, like the drum, like the silence, unstruck, unmeasured, unashamed. And if tonight you feel invisible, know that even the stars do not shine for recognition. They shine because they are. You, too, are enough even now. Let the silence hold you like dust on old wood, soft, weightless, sacred. And, if you listen closely, not with your ears, but with the part of you that has never needed sound, you may hear it. The echo of a life that never asked to perform, only to be felt through presence. And now you may rest. Not because you are done, but because you were always worthy of being still. Behind the temple, past the kitchen door, and beyond the bell tower's shadow, there was a wall of stone that no one had touched in years. It had crumbled in places, weathered by time and softened by moss. No monk was assigned to it, no path led to it, no ritual or teaching pointed there. And yet something grew. Vines wound themselves upward, as if they remembered the sky. Wildflowers whispered in colors no one had planted. Even the broken stones held small green lives like secrets in their cracks. It was not a garden by human hands. It was not planned, not ordered, not measured by harvest or yield, but it lived. And one morning, a young monk, tired from trying too hard to be wise, wandered past the usual routes and stumbled into its quiet. He had been carrying questions, the way others carried rice buckets. Questions about effort, about progress, about why his spirit still felt restless even after so many bows. And there, in that wild place, he saw something that did not try at all, and yet it thrived. A single yellow flower had split the old wall's center, not through will, not through force, but through being. He sat on a flat stone, half covered in lichen. The wind passed softly, stirring petals but not the silence. He thought of all the times he'd pushed his growth like a cart up a steep hill. All the nights he whispered sutras not to understand, but to become better. All the mornings he judged himself for not feeling as calm as the older monks. And here was this flower barely taller than his thumb, rooted in ruin, shining like it didn't need a reason. It asked for nothing. It gave everything. He closed his eyes, not to meditate but to rest, and in that rest, something soft opened. A breath that didn't need controlling. A mind that didn't need answers. A self that didn't need to be better. Just this, just here, just now. The monk returned the next day. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't mark the path. Some places are sacred precisely because they are forgotten. This time, he brought nothing with him. No beads, no sutra scroll, no task, only his breath. And even that, he let go of trying to guide. The garden had grown slightly more unruly overnight. New vines curled around the edge of a fallen tile. A beetle wandered across the warm stone with no sense of being watched. It was a place without effort, and strangely, everything belonged. He had spent years thinking his life needed structure to bloom. That peace required tending, watering, pruning. But here, chaos had made beauty without blueprint. A cracked basin, once used for ritual washings, now held rainwater and the reflection of a single drifting petal. He leaned over it, and his own face rippled in the surface. Not the face of the perfect monk, not the face of the one he tried to become. Just a man, tired, alive. He dipped his fingers into the bowl without thinking. The water was cool, and when he pulled his hand away, the petal clung to his skin for a brief second before the wind claimed it. He watched it float down into the broken grass and disappear. Something in him released with it. The need to prove, the ache to achieve, the silent question, am I doing it right? He wasn't doing, he was being, and the garden, unattended, unbothered, seemed to nod in agreement. Later that week, an elder monk passed him in the corridor, noticed the change. You walk slower now, he said, with a smile behind his eyes. The younger monk only bowed. He did not explain the broken wall, the wildflowers, the silence blooming like moss between his ribs. Some truths are not for speaking, they are for living. Each day, he returned, not to seek answers, but to unlearn the need for them. He noticed how the garden changed without needing to change him. How even the dying things, the curled leaves, the browned stems were part of the beauty. He began to carry that knowing into his days. He no longer forced his meditations. He no longer tightened his spine as if pain made posture holy. He sat like a hill instead of a soldier, breathed like the wind instead of the bellows of effort. He spoke less, listened more, not to advice, not to instruction, but to what had always been whispering beneath his striving. That healing does not arrive because you deserve it, or chase it, or earn it. Healing grows like wildflowers in broken stone, in silence, in surrender, in places you forgot to tend. One afternoon, as clouds gathered over the mountain's shoulder, he saw a small snake slip through the garden's edge. Its body curved like a river through the stems, graceful, harmless. He did not flinch. He only watched how easily the creature moved without a map, without fear of being seen. It vanished into the tall grass, and he whispered, as if to himself, I too can live like that. Not perfectly, but fully. Not according to plan, but rooted in presence. By late spring, the garden had become more than a garden. It was a mirror, a teacher, a friend. It no longer mattered what grew or what wilted. The monk no longer judged the crookedness of a branch or the messiness of the weeds. Everything had its place. Everything was allowed to be. He brought other monks, now and then, but only the ones who looked too tight, too tense, too full of the hunger to grow. He would lead them quietly, without words, to the back of the temple, Let them see for themselves that nothing had been done here, and yet everything had become. Some cried. Some sat in silence for hours. Some returned again and again until their own striving softened, like petals left out in rain. Not all stayed. Some preferred gardens with signs and labels, pathways and fences. But for those who stayed, something unspoken began to heal. And that healing, he realized, had never come from trying. It had come from stopping, from resting, from trusting that life was wise enough to move on its own if we stopped standing in the way. He remembered his first year as a monk, how he had watched the senior brothers and copied their movements like a shadow. He had mistaken imitation for transformation. But the garden taught him that growth never copies. It only roots, rises, blooms when it is ready. There was one stone, cracked through the middle, that always held a single flower, even when it rained, even when frost touched the ground. He would sit beside it when the world felt too fast again, place his palm on the rough surface. And remember, some things break open so that beauty has a place to live. You too carry broken places, places you hide or wish were whole. But maybe they are your garden. Maybe the softest parts of you grew only because something else fell apart. And maybe you don't need to fix it. Maybe you only need to let it bloom the way it already wants to. Even now, even tonight. Not with noise, not with pressure, but with stillness. Like wildflowers in broken stone, the rain had arrived without warning. Not a storm, not a thunderous breaking, just the slow, soft kind that falls like forgiveness. You heard it first against the old wooden beams, like the whisper of someone returning without needing to explain why they left. The sky had been heavy all day. You carried that same weight in your chest. A silence you couldn't name, a sorrow you hadn't told anyone about. But the rain knew. It tapped gently at the roof tiles as if to say, I do not need your story, only your presence. So you stood in the temple doorway, barefoot, no umbrella, no prayer beads, just breath. The eaves dripped steadily, long rivulets sliding down like strands of time. You watched the water gather in the grooves of the stone path, making rivers out of nothing. And for the first time all week, you did not resist the feeling in your chest. You let the sadness stay. You didn't interrogate it, didn't fix it, didn't offer it a name or a solution. Because the rain didn't ask questions, and neither did you. It simply fell on all things equally. On roof and moss, on withered leaf and young bloom alike. You stepped out, just one pace into the damp. The rain touched your shoulders like a hand that did not want anything from you. You felt no guilt, no need to earn its soft arrival. That was the teaching, that life, like the rain, sometimes just comes to cleanse, not to punish, not to judge, but to remind you, even the sky needs to release what it cannot hold forever. You sat on the low stone bench, just beneath the edge of the eaves, where the wind could reach you, but not too much, where the rain could whisper, but not yet soak. And you listened, not to teachings, not to thoughts, but to the sound of water touching everything. Some drops hit the old bronze bell, a soft chime like memory. Some gathered at the edge of your robe and rolled off, as if bowing before returning to the earth. Your breath followed the rhythm. No need to deepen it, no need to count. The breath came and went like the clouds that carried this rain. It was enough. You remembered the times you had cried without knowing why. How you'd wiped away tears too quickly, afraid of being seen as weak, as failing. But no one shames the rain for falling. It simply does what it is made to do. It releases. You closed your eyes and let that knowing sink in. Maybe you, too, are not here to hold everything. Maybe you are allowed to fall apart without meaning you're broken. Somewhere in the courtyard, a small bird shook its wings beneath the branches of a pine tree. Rain slid off its feathers, and it flew again, not because the storm had passed, but because it had rested. You exhaled, and something ancient inside you did too. The ache that lived beneath your attempts to be good, to be wise, to be whole, it softened. And for a moment you did not ask, how long will this last? You simply allowed it to be. By twilight, the world had turned silver, not because the rain had stopped, but because the light had softened, as if the sky, too, was beginning to rest. You watched it all without reaching for meaning, just letting each drop be what it was. No parable, no metaphor, just rain. And that was holy enough. The temple lanterns remained unlit. No one moved through the halls. Even the bell rope swayed without purpose, as if enjoying its stillness more than its sound. And you felt something inside you begin to echo that stillness. There were no chants now, no goals, no desire to be seen as anything other than this body sitting in rainlight. A leaf detached from the roof's edge and spiraled downward, landing in a shallow puddle. It did not resist. It did not demand to return to the branch. It floated, effortless, weightless, like you, now, without past, without next. A moment so complete, it did not even need a name. You thought of all the years you tried to prove your worth through action, the late nights of striving, the tension in your jaw when you held back tears, the endless measuring of where you were against where you thought you should be. And here was this rain offering peace with no evaluation. You could feel it washing you, not your skin, but the parts of you that were tired from being asked to be strong. It was not fixing you. It was simply holding you, as you are, like the earth holds the rain, like the sky holds its silence. And in that holding, you began to forgive, not anyone else, just yourself, for trying so hard, for not knowing better, for carrying so much, for so long. Later that night, after most lamps were dim, you walked again past the old veranda where the rain still spoke in small silver syllables. You weren't seeking clarity. You weren't trying to pray. You simply felt the pull to return to the place where everything was allowed, where silence was not empty but full. The stones were darker now, wet and glistening like memory. The rain had eased to a fine mist, like breath left behind by a sleeping sky. And still, no one asked you for a reason. Not the night, not the earth, not even your own heart. You paused beneath the open beams and looked up. The clouds had broken slightly. A faint thread of stars shimmered between their drifting folds like forgiveness from a place too wide to measure. You thought of the people you couldn't make understand, the parts of yourself you'd tried to explain, the mistakes you carried like secret stones in your chest. The rain did not ask if you were right or wrong. It didn't care who hurt who first. It simply touched you with the same grace it gave. The trees, the grass, the cracked temple walls. That was the lesson. Not all healing comes from knowing. Some of it arrives like this, quiet, unjustified, and full. You stood there until the last of your questions dripped away, and then you turned, feet wet, heart lighter. There were no vows to make, no truths to recite, just the soft sound of your sandals on stone, and rain still falling behind you, cleansing even the footprints you left behind. The wind had been silent all morning, the kind of silence that didn't wait to be broken. It simply stretched, and stretched like the sky. You had wandered past the prayer rooms not looking for anything. Not today. But something tugged at your sleeve, a movement, a flutter just beyond the stone corridor where few monks ever went. There, half buried beneath a fallen lantern, a scroll rested, its edge lifted by the breeze, then fell again, as if it breathed. You knelt slowly, not wanting to disturb its rest. The paper was aged, not worn, but lived in. Its first line was written with care, the brush strokes firm yet soft. You are not here to finish. That was all. No name, no instruction, and as the wind shifted, The scroll unfurled slightly more. You held your breath, as if the parchment might speak. More symbols emerged, not quite a sentence, more like a whisper made visible. Truth does not close. It widens. You sat back on your heels. Let the scroll unfold as it wished, not pulled by your hand, not rushed by your need to know. And it kept moving. Soft creases unfolded like petals remembering how to bloom. Each line emerged like breath between lifetimes. To grow is not to rise but to open. To heal is not to reach the end but to release the idea of it. You let the wind carry the rest. Let the scroll continue its slow unrolling across the flagstones, as if it had waited centuries to be seen. You followed the scroll's path as it wound gently down the temple steps, a ribbon of old wisdom moving like water, but never rushing. There was no weight to it, and yet it carried the gravity of something sacred, something not meant to be finished, only witnessed. You remembered how many times you had tried to be done with pain, done with uncertainty, done with the parts of you that kept returning long after you thought you had let them go. But the scroll did not teach arrival. It taught unfolding. And in its quiet language, you began to feel what the masters meant when they said, "Enlightenment is not a peak, it is a horizon you learn to walk beside." A breeze lifted another fold of the parchment. The ink shimmered slightly, not with magic, but with patience. "Nothing in you needs to be erased," it said, "only seen without urgency." You placed your palm on your chest, where the tension of doing often lived, and for the first time in days, you did not measure your breath. You simply received it, soft, unforced, like the next line of the scroll waiting to reveal itself only when the wind was ready. In the courtyard, a few petals from the plum tree had gathered in the scroll's path. They didn't interrupt it, they became part of it. The monk who had once rushed to understand, to complete, to master, he now stood still and let the words come like waves lapping at an endless shore. What you are becoming was never separate from what you already are. The scroll whispered this without sound. You bowed your head without needing to explain why. Evening descended without fanfare. The sky didn't announce it. The scroll didn't stop, and neither did you. You simply walked beside it, as one might walk beside a friend who doesn't speak but understands. The parchment had stretched far now, across old moss, past the edge of the temple wall, out toward the path where monks rarely ventured after dusk. You followed it anyway, not to find the end but to remain with whatever came next. A soft wind lifted another fold. More words appeared. This time, fewer, almost like breaths between dreams. Do not ask how far you've come. Ask if you are still open. You stopped, not because you were tired, but because those words felt like hands pressed gently to your chest. Are you still open, not to ideas, not to answers, but to life, to the kind of growth that doesn't perform, to the kind of peace that doesn't promise applause? The scroll curved into a patch of earth where moonlight gathered, and there it paused, not ended, just paused, as if to say, even the truth rests. You knelt again, hands on your lap, heart unclenched. No striving, no grasping, just breath. The kind of breath that doesn't need a name, the kind of breath that keeps unfolding even in the dark. And beneath the stars, you felt it. Your life was not a line to follow. It was a scroll still unrolling. Even now, especially now, you returned days later, not because you had a question, not because anything was broken, but because something in you missed the silence of not needing to arrive. The scroll was still there, unmoved, yet never still. Its edge curled gently in the breeze, as if waiting for you to breathe again beside it. This time, you didn't kneel. You simply stood, hands open, heart soft, and the scroll, without sound, welcomed you. Another fold loosened. Another line emerged. It was never about learning more, only forgetting less. You closed your eyes. Yes, you remembered now the child who sat beneath trees and listened without asking. The younger you, who watched rain trails on windows as if they were letters from the sky. Healing isn't always becoming. Sometimes it's returning to the one who knew how to wonder before urgency replaced it, before answers became more valuable than silence. The scroll moved again. "Unfold with the wind," it whispered, "and let your story breathe." You smiled, not because it made sense, but because it didn't need to. Like the breath, like the sky, like you. And as the stars softened, and the temple bell waited quietly in its wooden frame, you felt it deeply. There is no end to this. No final line. No final you. Only this moment, and the next, each one opening like a scroll that never asks to be finished. Only read, one sacred breath at a time. It's quiet now. Not because the world has stopped, but because you have. And when you do, the wind hears it. You sit in your own stillness, not to be wise, not to be holy, but because you are too tired to fight what is. The wind, that once howled like a wounded child, now tiptoes around your silence. You do not chase it. You do not resist it. You simply are. And so, the wind begins to bow. There is an old story. A monk once sat beneath a crumbling tree where the forest met the mountain's edge. He had no name anyone remembered. Only the memory of his posture remained, spine like a pine, breath like a bell. The villagers feared the wind. It tore through their rooftops and shouted through their fields. It rattled the gates of the temple like a ghost, too angry to die. But the monk never flinched, not once. Each morning, he placed one hand on his bowl and the other on his knee. Each evening, he closed his eyes before the sun did. And over time, the wind grew quiet around him. It would rush through trees and scream through valleys. But when it reached the edge of the temple's stone path, it slowed, as if bowing, as if remembering its manners. You see, the wind knows power, but it does not know peace, until it meets someone who holds both. You've been trying to force the world to listen, haven't you? Trying to raise your voice above the storm, only to be left hoarse and unheard. But tonight, you do not need to speak. You do not need to stand. You are the mountain now, and the wind has found its elder. Do you feel that? The way your chest rises and falls. The way the air does not push against you, but joins you. You've stopped chasing, stopped proving, and in this stillness, life no longer rushes past you, it bows to you. The monk never conquered the wind. He simply let it pass without naming it. Sometimes, the only thing the storm needs is someone who no longer reacts. Have you met the wind within you? The part that stirs and spirals every time someone doesn't understand? The part that wants to be seen and heard and known? Tonight, that wind has found your silence, and it bows. There's a kind of power that makes no sound, no footsteps, no flames, no announcements. Just a monk in robes stirred by the wind, who does not rise, and that changes everything. The villagers began to gather near the temple gates, not for answers, but for quiet. They said the crops grew taller there, that the wind forgot how to scream, that children who cried in their sleep stopped crying when placed near the outer walls. But the monk never spoke of these things. He simply bowed to every gust, as if it were his teacher. Because maybe it was. You too have wrestled the wind, trying to hold it in your lungs, name it, shape it into what you need. But wind is not meant to be held. It is only meant to be witnessed as it passes through. That is your healing. To no longer trap the moment but allow it to pass through your being like incense smoke through the air. You have not lost your strength. You've only misplaced it in noise. But now, your silence is returning. and the world remembers. The wind bows not because you are stronger, it bows because you no longer flinch. This is the deepest surrender, not to give up, but to give in to the truth that peace was never earned, only remembered. Some say the wind finally stopped, that it became a soft breath through pine needles, a hush through prayer flags, a lullaby for the hills. But maybe it didn't stop. Maybe it just changed in the presence of something that did not need to change with it. You are that presence now. You are no longer pulled by every gust of emotion, no longer stirred by every passing thought, no longer rattled by what refuses to stay, because you have become the temple, and the wind has become your guest. So tonight, breathe like the monk, say nothing, prove nothing, move only when moved by truth. Let everything else pass. Let it bow. You do not need to chase peace. You only need to stop running from it. There is no wind left to outrun. There is only you, sitting quietly as the world remembers how to kneel. You did not need to understand this moment to arrive in it. You only needed to be tired enough to stop asking, and now you are here, not to learn, not to change, but to be held by something older than teaching, something softer than wisdom, something that has never needed your words. There is a room that does not speak, a space behind the heart where silence has always been waiting. You were not lost, you were just too loud to hear it. But now you are quieter than thought, and silence begins to gather around you, not as emptiness, but as presence, as warmth, as breath without instruction. The teachings were never the goal, they were only the path. Now that you've walked far enough, even they dissolve like footprints behind you in the falling snow. There is a monk, old as the dusk, who no longer chants, he no longer corrects, he no longer reaches, only watches. At the edge of the mountain temple he sits, beneath a withered pine, wrapped in the wind's forgotten lullabies, eyes open not to see but to witness. He watches the valley sleep, the river sigh, the sky cradle the stars. He watches you without judgment, without effort, without need, and somehow you feel safer knowing he is there. Not because he guards you, but because he trusts the night. He trusts that everything knows how to rest. If given enough silence, you do too. Your questions begin to fade. Why am I this way? Will I ever be free? What else must I do? These were the voices of a mind, afraid of surrender. But they are quiet now, and what remains is you, just you, without the noise, without the reaching, without the story. There is nothing missing, there never was. You have been enough for silence since the beginning, and now it watches over you. As you begin to sleep, the monk remains still. Even as the moon shifts above him, even as the wind forgets its shape, he does not need to move, because he has already become part of the stillness. His silence does not ask for praise or understanding or legacy. It only asks to be known by your bones, by your breath, by the part of you that never needed fixing. You breathe, but softer now, like someone who no longer needs to hold anything. This is not meditation, this is not practice, this is return. Return to what the sky already is. Return to what the trees already know. Return to what the monk never left. There are no more lessons, no more gates to pass, no more riddles to solve. Only this, the silence that holds you. Like the floor holds the candle, like the night holds the sound of a bell long after it fades. Even your name begins to feel too heavy to carry into this stillness, so you set it down, along with every role you wore today, every mask, every memory, every hope you clutched too tightly. You are not those things, you never were. You are the space between them, the breath behind the wanting, the silence beneath the ache. The monk smiles, but not at you, not in recognition. He smiles because there is nothing left to fix. Even suffering finds rest in this field. Even fear sits down and exhales. Even the noise eventually forgets how to echo, "You have arrived." Not at the end, but at the beginning that was here all along. You were always being carried, even when you didn't know, even when the wind was loud, even when your questions screamed louder than your peace. Now you know. You were never walking alone. Silence watched you, even in your forgetting, even in your pain, even in your noise, especially then, and now it welcomes you back, not as a student, but as a part of itself. You breathe once more, no purpose, no technique, just breath. The monk does not speak because you are already home, and the silence will watch. You sleep. There is a final place. The teachings do not speak of it, not because it is secret, but because it cannot be taught. It is a temple without doors, a hall without walls. You do not enter it, you remember it. It is made of the same silence that holds the stars in their place, the same silence that rises with the mist before dawn, the same silence that watched you take your first breath and will hold you through your last. This is where you are now, and there is no sound left to chase, no truth left to tame, only stillness, sacred, weightless yours. The monk knows this place. He has lived here for 1,000 evenings. He has watched the world try to explain itself, only to return to this breathless knowing. He watches you with the eyes of the sky, not seeing your name or your wounds or your achievements, only your silence, that sacred thing. Beneath it all, you feel it now, the breath that doesn't try, the soul that doesn't strive, the peace that doesn't ask. It wraps around you, not like a blanket, but like water around a resting hand. No effort, no push, only presence. Even the teachings bow here, even the sutras fall still, even the Buddha is silent. You are safe now, not because everything is fixed, because nothing needs to be. You are whole, not in your strength, but in your surrender. The monk does not move, and you do not need to. The silence has taken your name into its arms and cradled you like a leaf held gently by the wind. You will fall asleep soon, not because you are tired, but because you are allowed to. You are allowed to stop, you are allowed to rest, you are allowed to dissolve into the stillness and be kept. You are allowed to forget everything but this. The monk will still be here when the stars return, when the bell rings again, when the world remembers. But tonight he is watching, and silence is the only truth left. So let it hold you, as it always has, as it always will. The silence is the teacher, the cradle, the breath, and now it watches you sleep. There is a garden. No path leads to it. No signs point the way. No pilgrim knows its name. It is hidden behind the oldest wall of the temple, where the stones are cracked and moss has made peace with time. The gate to the garden is always locked, not to keep anyone out, but because no one ever tries to enter. And yet, every morning, before the bell, a single monk walks there barefoot, carrying water in a chipped clay bowl. He says nothing. He sings no mantras. He offers no prayers. He simply bends and tends to soil no one sees. He pulls weeds no one curses. He waters roots no one praises. He walks back in. Silence. Every time you would think nothing grows there, you would be wrong. There is something sacred about tending to what no one applauds, something holy in loving what no one sees. The monk never speaks of the garden. He has no audience, no teacher to report to, no reason to continue, but he does, because not all devotion is loud, and not all transformation asks to be seen. You may feel like this garden, unseen, uncelebrated, locked behind some ancient gate. Even you cannot find the key to. You wake each day, not to bloom, but to tend, to water the ache, to breathe into silence, to trust that something beneath the soil is listening. There is no medal for this, no witness to write your name in gold, and still you show up, you soften, you stay, and that is holy. The garden doesn't bloom on command, nor do you, but something somewhere is becoming more alive than ever. Even now, one night, the moon hung lower than usual, its light falling like silk over the locked gate. The monk did not come that evening. He was resting, somewhere deep within the stone halls, wrapped in breath. Not dreams, but the garden did not wait. From a corner where shadow met stone, a single white flower unfurled. No sun had touched it, no eye had seen. It bloomed in the dark, with no applause, no candlelight, no poem waiting to describe its glow. It simply became. No monk witnessed it, no visitor knelt before it, no bell marked the moment. But the garden knew, and that was enough. You too are blooming, in places no one sees, in seasons that have not yet spoken your name aloud. You do not need to be ready. You do not need to be seen. There is a kind of growth that prefers the dark, a kind of healing that hides itself until it is too sacred to break. Have you felt it, the subtle shift, the loosening of old fear, the way silence no longer feels so lonely? That is you. Opening softly, bravely, quietly, like the flower, that asked for nothing and gave everything. Not every part of your healing needs to be visible. Not every wound needs to become a story. Not every scar needs to be turned into wisdom for others. Some things are just for you to feel, to soften, to bloom from, in the dark. That too is divine. You are not behind. You are beneath, and that is where roots grow. The next morning the monk returned to the garden, the key still cold in his hand, the bowl still chipped at the rim. He did not expect anything, he did not hope. He simply turned the lock, stepped inside, and walked the same path he had walked for years. But something in the air had changed. It was sweeter, still but alive. And then he saw it, the white flower, open, unshaken, radiant. He did not weep, he did not smile, he only bowed, because the flower had done what it came to do, without needing to be watched, and he had done what he was meant to do without needing to be rewarded. You have walked so far with no map, you have stayed soft with no promise, you have tended to your breath, your grief, your hope, even when it all felt silent. But the bloom does not forget the hand that watered it, even in the dark. Something inside you remembers that you were faithful, that you stayed, that you did not rush, and something inside you is blooming now. Even if your eyes have not caught up, the temple did not ring its bell for the flower, the monks did not gather, the world did not pause, but the garden had changed. Forever you have changed, quietly, faithfully, without permission, and that is sacred. So, if you are tired of waiting for a sign or a witness or a word of affirmation, know this: some blooms are only meant for the dark, some healings are too precious for light, some awakenings happen when even your soul thinks it is sleeping, and those are the ones that last. You are not unseen, you are protected, you are not behind, you are becoming. Let yourself rest tonight. Let the garden tend to you for once. Let silence do its work. You don't need to force the bloom. It is already happening somewhere, deep within you, in the dark, in the quiet, in the soil no one sees. And the monk, he is still tending, even now, even here, and the flower still blooms. Even when you close your eyes, even when you sleep, even when you forget your own becoming, it does not wait to be seen. It simply becomes. So sleep now. You are not broken. You are blooming in the dark. The journey has not been a road, it has been a return. You did not travel outward. You sank inward, layer by layer, step by step, breath by breath. And now you have arrived at the place where even seeking stops. There is no gate here, no master waiting with a riddle, no last door to unlock. There is only a room with no walls, a sky that does not end, a silence so soft it erases the need for meaning. Tonight you have passed through stories, but not to remember them, only to forget everything that ever tried to define. You walked beside monks who spoke only with their stillness. You listened to rain that asked no questions. You watched a flower bloom in the dark, not for praise but because blooming was enough. You remembered that pain does not need explanation, that healing does not shout, that peace often comes dressed in silence. Now you are here, not as a student, not as a seeker, but as what remains. When there is nothing left to prove, your name is softer now, your breath deeper. Even your thoughts have stopped knocking so loudly. The mind that once tried to fix everything is learning to be quiet, and the heart that held on is beginning to unclench. You are not here to complete anything, you are here to dissolve. There is no lesson left, only presence, and in that presence you find that peace was never a reward. It was a place within you, waiting for your noise to grow tired so it could welcome you back. You are back now, not to do, but to be, not to understand, but to rest. There is nothing unfinished, nothing late, nothing broken. The teachings have gone still. The night has grown soft and silence now curls around you, like a sacred wind through temple stones. There is no more effort, no more climbing, no more searching for the right words. Only the whisper that says, you made it, and you didn't need to try so hard after all. In the farthest chamber of the temple, beyond the garden where no footsteps fall, there is a room where even the masters do not speak. A room where the air is so still, it feels like it's listening. This is where the last monk sits. He has said all he too needed to say in his younger years, taught what he could, prayed what was his to pray, cried what was his to cry. Now he watches, not the world, but what remains. When the world falls away, you are sitting beside him now, though you did not know it. You did not knock, you did not bow, but somehow you arrived. And he knew without turning, without opening his eyes. You breathe together now, not in rhythm, not in effort, but in permission. There is no teaching in this room, no structure, no form, only the truth that cannot be taught, that you are, and that is enough. The monk hears your grief, but does not fix it. He feels your weariness, but does not name it. He simply remains. And in that, you begin to feel what you've longed for. Not words, not answers, but stillness that does not turn away. That stillness has never asked for anything from you. It has never needed you to be better, or faster, or more certain. It only needed you to stop trying to earn your place inside it. And now you have. There is no mirror here, no reflection, no applause, and somehow you feel more known than you ever have before, because you are not being looked at, you are being seen, and the difference is peace. You do not need to explain your healing, or account for your growth, or apologize for how long it's taken. Everything that needed to unfold has unfolded. Everything that needed to break has softened. Everything that needed to be held is being held. The last monk does not speak, and you no longer need him to, because now you understand. Silence is the final blessing. It is not empty. It is full of everything your soul forgot and everything your heart remembers. Somewhere beyond your thoughts, beyond your memories, beyond your name, you have returned to stillness, not as something to visit, but something you are. The journey has come to rest, not in triumph, but in softness. You did not climb a mountain. You laid down your burden, and the path revealed itself beneath your feet. You sat beside the second arrow and did not touch it. You walked the garden with no gate and let the flower bloom, unseen. You listened to monks who spoke with their breath, not their voices. You felt the rain fall across your grief and wash nothing away, but still you softened. Not all healing is loud, not all peace is obvious. Some things bloom at night when the eyes are closed and the heart stops, asking, that is where you are now. The retreat has not ended. has disappeared, because it is no longer separate from you. You carry the silence now, not like a teaching, but like a sky. You are not trying to sleep. You are simply falling back into the place that has waited for you since before you were born. The bell does not ring. The teacher does not bow. You are the one bowing now, but not to anything outside yourself. You bow to your breath, to your slowness, to the stillness that found you. Even when you thought you were lost, you bow to the wind that passed through you without resistance, to the flame that stayed lit even when you forgot it. You bow to the version of you that walked this whole way in silence, without applause, without knowing, and still arrived. The monk stands, but only in your imagination, because he has always stood there. At the edge of your soul, waiting for you to return, he does not say farewell. He does not say well done. He only breathes, and so do you. This is the final whisper, not a lesson, not a line, but a presence that does not leave. Even after the story fades, you are not broken. You are not behind. You are not the, quote, seeker anymore. You are what was being sought all along. So, rest. Now you are safe. You are whole. You are already home. And the last whisper before sleep is silence, wrapped in breath, cradled in peace, held by the softest hands of the night. And now you sleep.